Camp Beta. This is episode, are we at 105 now, Chris?
I think we're calling this one 105, yeah.
So our numbering system is a little opaque even to us, but, you know.
Does that mean this is your 105th episode?
Well, you know, we stopped the original podcast around episode 30-ish or something. And, you know, there have been enough intervening months. Maybe not exactly 100, but, you know.
Okay.
In a world where we did fill in that void with casts.
I see.
That's a cute way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't think about that. I thought it was more just like a nice jump. You know, it was enough. It's like season 2. You know, you start the numbering
Right.
somewhere else.
Right. I like this.
Yeah. So we have with us today. Well, first of all, I'm Sean,
And I'm Chris.
and we have with us today the esteemed professor R-Luke-Dubois,
Hi.
who is head of the IDM department at NYU Tandon. Is that?
Yes. Integrated Design and Media at NYU
Not the
Tandon.
Auditor department.
Yeah.
it actually is.
We worked really hard on the search engine optimization around that to try to beat out all those guys, but it's hard. It's really hard. Yeah.
So Luke has an impossibly stacked resume, which we'll tuck into a little bit here. So, you know, we always start with the basics.
Okay.
How did you get into weird music, weird art, etc.?
Right.
Was it through an encounter with a particular album, the guidance of a friend or mentor, involvement in a senior community? Put crudely, can you identify the moment that ruined your life?
Yes, I absolutely can.
Yes.
No. I can very specifically identify the movement. I was playing my freshman year in college. I was playing in a very cool band. It was a bilingual hardcore band. It's called Des Vio. Half the songs were in Spanish.
Okay.
All right. The singer and the guitar player were these Ecuadorian guys from Queens. The drummer was my friend Paul. We were playing at CBGB's, and I was a bass player. And during the set break, a woman bummed a cigarette off me, and she was like one of the other bands on the bill, right? And I was like, "What do you do?" And she was like, "I study electronic music at Columbia University." And I was like, "Electronic music? What the fuck is that?" So that's the answer. So
Okay.
I worked at this thing that used to be called the Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Center. That is now called the Columbia Computer Music Center. And when I got there, it was still a 100% analog shop. The class I took was around splicing tape, right, and using test oscillators. The professor was a guy named Art Krieger, who I think then went on to teach at Connecticut College. And we, the first assignment was like, realize a 2-part Bach chorale using test oscillator and tape.
Okay.
So the gotcha moment is like you have to figure out like how many inches is a quarter note. You have to splice it all together. But then the gotcha moment is you have to synchronize 2 tracks.
Okay.
So you have to it's all about like having that like OCD, making sure all the notes are the right length for the whatever.
And you passed with us.
And so mine wasn't that good, but the thing I did that was wrong was there was a button on the test oscillator that switched it from a sine wave to a square wave. And so like so we had a week to do this, and we all get together to play it, and everybody's piece is like do 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 do, and mine is like bah, 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 like because I didn't understand gain staging, and I overdrived the whatever. Sounded terrible. And he was like, "What did you do?" And I was like, "Well, I hit the button on the whatever." And he's like, "Don't ever do that again." Right? Yeah, and that was like my first electronic music class. But then there was a coup d'etat where the old analog guys left. Mario Davidovsky, who was the director, he left for Harvard, and they brought in a lovely guy who just retired last year. This guy Brad Garton, who was they brought over from Princeton, and he was a computer music guy. He was like a Next Machine guy, right? He was like a digital signal processing guy. And the thing that they did that was brilliant and very like wonderful in hindsight is they didn't throw out the analog shit. They just added computers, which gave me this like very like unusual exposure to all this stuff where like I was writing like C++ synthesizer algorithms trying to sound like a Buchla.
Awesome. Because
And that's like not normal.
This
right?
this was like the thing at this moment in time, right?
Yeah.
When people started going digital in the mid '90s, they just chucked all the analog.
They chucked all the analog stuff, right? So the
and that's how so many friends and colleagues of ours wound up getting like, I got my synthy that way or,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Did
Totally.
they still have the RCA? They didn't.
Yeah, so my work study job was to work for their tech director on the RCA. They had the RCA is still there.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it's it's that thing.
That's the room sized. Yeah.
Yeah, and that thing is like, it's still there. It's 487 vacuum tubes. It's built to like U.S. Air Force specifications. It's bolted to the floor. It's not going anywhere. And it really hasn't like worked. Like if you did an episode with like Seth Cluett, he could actually tell you
Right.
what was going on. But like my memory of it is, it was used really early on at that place in the 50s and 60s. So like Warren has this piece Times Encomium, right? Babbitt has this piece Philomel. They were done on the RCA. And then, some smartass in New Jersey invented this thing called the transistor. So within like 5 years, that thing was kind of pointless.
Right.
And then they got Buchelas and Serge modulars and a little bit of Moog equipment and whatever. And everything just miniaturized so radically that they kind of just treated it like a dinosaur. And then there was a break-in at the Electronic Music Center in the late 1970s where it was vandalized. And then kind of nobody ever touched it until, I got a little bit of sound out of it and puttered around on it. And then much, much later, like in the last 10 years, Seth worked on it.
Right.
r-luke-dubois worked on it. They sort of started doing some design research around how it's put together.
Right.
But
and I know there have been some efforts to record on it.
Yeah, you can record on it. You can it's cool. It's a heterodyning system. So there's basically it's very serialist coded. Like one of the things you can't do on the RCA is a glissando.
Right.
Because you can't do, if you're counting to 12, you can't do a glissando, right? So what it is,
it's not allowed.
Yeah. So there's a hyper precision tuned out of your hearing range oscillator bank, and everything's heterodyning. So you're hearing different tones.
Can we just have a passing nod towards the just the absurdity of surrealism? That's your serialism?
Yeah,
surrealism too. But,
yeah, but I mean it's kind of wonderful.
So much of what we love at the end of the day was based in everything Stockhausen did had to be serial at the end of the day. So much of what we love emerges out of serialism, and yet its rules seem so ridiculous and antiquated and useless.
So my favorite thing about the RCA was it was encoded as a 4-bit binary system. But when you're doing serialism, your address space is all around 12. So what do you do with those 4 extra numbers? Right? And so these guys retroactively created this additional pitch vocabulary to fill it into a 4-bit address space. So you could pitch. So 0 through 11 were the pitch classes that you would expect. And then 12, 13, 14, and 15 were different types of percussive unpitched tones.
Okay, well that's
right that they made up.
Sensible.
And they were super anal about it. So there was one, there was the in the right. And then you could add that to your compositional language or whatever. and then they had it was for integral serialism. So there were 16 possible dynamics, 16 possible filter settings.
Right.
16 everything was it was encoded like that. And you couldn't do glissandos or portamentos because why would the oscillators ever move? Right. You couldn't do you could kind of grab a knob and be fuck it and go and you could change something, but you couldn't do much with it. And
why wouldn't they break up the octave into 16 notes instead? And
do
microtonal?
I think that would imply a crack in the majesty of the 12 tone equal temperament schema. I think that would have been if you had suggested that to Milton Babbitt in 1962, he would have taken a revolver out of his desk 100%. And pointed it at you and shot you and dumped you in the East River. That's what it would have happened, right? Like, I mean, I think it was
It's the start of a good movie.
Yeah, those guys were like pretty committed to the bit. And,
yeah, right, exactly.
And the most hilarious thing about it was it used a paper tape drive, and the paper tape. This is the most crazy thing about the system. I'll give you guys like a photo to illustrate this. You can use if you want. But like the thing was a real-time system. It was a synthesizer, so it didn't have to render. But the way they used it, the paper tape drive was so loud, you couldn't listen in the room while it was running. So it wrote to a shellac record lathe next to the synth, and then you would go into another room and listen to it.
Amazing.
Does it still do it? Does it still work that way?
I mean, it would, yeah. I mean, if you got it running, like the paper tape drive is really loud. It sounds like a crank. Right, it's not quiet like a pianola. It's like loud.
So if I'm recalling correctly, I may be misremembering, but C. Spencer, who's a buddy of ours, did an album on the
Yeah, but he was just sampling. He was just hitting it.
Right. No, that's what I was going to say. He didn't make any sounds.
No,
he just banged around in the actual architecture.
I got 90 seconds of actual sound off the synthesizer using a paper tape that I found in an archive room that I think I fed wrong and upside down and did it all wrong because it didn't sound right. But I got like some music out of it in like 1997. But and I just recorded it to like my laptop or whatever the hell, or a computer. But but originally it went to a shellac record lathe, and then you would go in the other room, and they were basically like projecting as if it were a computer. Like if you talk to Ted Gordon, right, he would be like, that's an early example of that weird like cybernetic fetishism these guys all had, where they were putting those, they were making a category error. They were like putting the synthesizer in the same category as a computer, even though it didn't calculate anything. It's those things are hilariously not a computer. But they would do the rhetoric of computing with them, where they were like, well, this is an asynchronous offline system. It has to calculate. It has to make my recording, and then I'm going to go listen to my recording.
Right.
You're not supposed to improvise on it. You're not supposed to like make decisions in the moment. You're supposed to very clinically make this score, play it through, listen to the record. And that whole,
the idea of the synthesizer as a performance instrument was kind of impossible.
But it's all a charade, because really the reason they can't do that is because the goddamn paper tape drive is too loud. Like that was the actual reason. And then I believe they created sort of like a retroactive like continuity excuse for why the UX of that thing was so inelegant. And then once they got the booklets and Serges, those things just play. So you a mixer and you can record them or whatever, and that was different. But but the original chief engineer of that whole situation was still around when I was an undergrad. He was this guy Peter Mosé. There's like a pretty famous photo of the RCA when it is first unveiled. That's Milton Babbitt and Vladimir Usichevsky and this third guy. He's the third guy in the photo. The guy's name is Peter Mosé. And he was the original staff engineer for the Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Center. And he was pretty much the only other guy who like knew how it was wired and whatever, who did not work for the Radio Corporation of America, right? Like he was the only Columbia guy who knew how to use it, really. Okay. And it was totally amazing. I mean, it is amazing that they did this thing. It is also amazing that within 7 years it was pointless because you could buy a booklet. Right. Like, and you didn't need any of this stuff anymore.
Well, so to zoom back to you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're in the picture here somewhere, right?
I mean, I got there much later. I got there in 93, but in 93 it was still very like, it looked exactly like it did in 1973 and 1993. They had.
So what was like the studio like in 93? And I guess this is this is when you were introduced to both Serge and Buchla stuff.
So the guys who were there before Brad took over were a little bit riding the gravy train. Like they had a big, for them, a very big space, and there were only 2 spaces that students had access to. And then basically Davidovsky had a private studio, and the other faculty, like Al Shields and Pearl Smiley and whatever, had their own workspaces. And so there was like an undergrad room and a grad room.
Okay.
And the undergrad room is room 313. And one side of the room was a whole bunch of crazy analog stuff. So there was a big custom purpose-built mixer with knobs and switches and patch bays. It had an EMT plate reverb. It had a beer pyramid of test oscillators.
Beautiful.
It had a Serge modular. It had a 76 anodized Serge modular. It had a bunch of built their Buchla 100 modules. They were Columbia blue.
Okay,
Like they built them off of kits. Seth still has some of them up there. They faded.
Did they color it blue just like
Columbia,
vanity,
man.
pure vanity.
Columbia.
just pure vanity?
The
Damn,
RCA
okay.
was originally Columbia blue too, and it rusted brown over time.
Was
But
it?
yeah,
Okay.
it was originally painted. They're all painted that like baby robin's egg blue. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so those kind of turned green. So those were kind of in a corner. Those were like reasonably new because they had built those for somebody else who then passed away and willed them back. So those I kind of set up. But and then on the other side of the room was like a TX816 and a DX7 and a Mac running Performer.
Okay.
And like opcode OMS and all
so
that crap.
Even in '93, the analog digital divide was utterly stark.
Yeah, they had it like these separate things, and they had this class called like MIDI music production techniques, right? And it was taught. This is '94. This is the second year I was there. It was taught by this guy Xenakis, who is, until very recently he was the head of the IV in school at USC, right? So he's a pretty interesting guy. Student of Xenakis. Did his doctorate there. He was the associate director. And he taught to the best of his ability, like Depeche Mode era pop MIDI production.
Amazing.
Right? Like, so it was like how to use a drum machine, how to program an FM synth using an editor librarian. Like we used Galaxy, which was the opcode editor librarian for FM synthesizers. There was like a very, very low rent sampler, like a K1000 or something like that. There was like a bunch of stuff and some effects processors, and there was this is 2 years before Pro Tools 3, so there was no way to record multi-track digital audio.
Right.
All we had was a sampler. We had a sample cell box. Right. So I did this piece where I like sang like an A and loaded it into sample cell, and I could be like, burr, 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 burr. It was like me. Or whatever,
right.
And I could sample the Serge. Yeah, exactly. I could do that. I could do this kind of Kate Bush shit. I did a lot of Kate Bush shit. I was very aware of like the Fairlight CMI style.
Wait, so
sampling.
So also to zoom out and back a second and bring it back to you. So you were introduced to the idea of electronic music by chance playing a hardcore show.
Yeah.
By a girl smoking cigarettes.
Did you discover weird electronic music at Columbia?
At school? Yeah, it was at school. Like I knew, like I was a radio. I was a DJ at Barnard College Radio. I had an 8 a.m. punk show. It's called Wake Up and Smell the Vinyl. My main job was
very 93.
My
right there.
main job was to traumatize the faculty who were trying to have their morning coffee in the student center because the radio station by policy was piped a little bit too loud into the student center. So I could play like all these like degeneration 7 inches and all the English professors were like, oh my God, stop. I'm trying to like, grade my papers like right before class or whatever. So that was my main role at that place. And so and so I was into like that kind of music. So the only thing I knew that was electronic would have been like new wave because my older sisters listened and my brother listened to it. So I knew like, my sister listened to Kate Bush and my sister listened to like
New Order
and all that stuff. And she thought it was super, and I loved that. I loved like listening to that stuff, but I was like into like punk rock.
Right.
And so I kind of knew about things like Atari Teenage Riot.
Well, that would have been a little later.
Yeah, but like there was like noise. Like I was aware because it's CBGBs those guys played.
Right.
So I was aware that there was like noise music.
You were still tapped into like the CBGB's world while you were doing your like academic electronic studies.
Because I was playing in all these bands.
Yeah.
And then eventually I stumbled into a band that was an electronic music band. I had this band called the Freight Elevator Quartet. There was like it was like a post rock thing. So that was my senior year. So I played Serges and Buchlas, and there was a guy with a bunch of drum machines, right?
So you brought out Serges and Buchlas?
Let me tour. Columbia let me tour with them.
Wow.
Which is insane. So I toured with a Buchla 100 series. And in a 76 Serge, and wait for it, a Next machine, right? I would bring a Next machine with me as our
amazing.
sampler. And then there was a guy with a bunch of drum machines. There was a cellist, and there was a didgeridoo player. And the whole idea, and it was live improvised drum and bass. So we were just kind of messing around.
You were just an undergrad?
What?
You're just an undergrad,
this
and they
is my
let you bring
senior
that?
year. And we called ourselves a Freight Elevator Quartet because we played in the Freight Elevator And these warehouse parties in that building in Prentice up in Harlem, they would do these art parties, and we would bring the audience in through the freight elevator, which was also the bar. And we would bring people from the loading dock up to the third floor, kick them out. But it was the only place to get a drink. So people kept piling back into the freight elevator and doing a round trip down. And my band was crammed in the corner. And
I love this. This is so
and
Gen X Williamsburg.
Yes, it's very
coded.
Gen X. Yeah, this is up in Harlem, and then we started playing, and then we became these kind of like art world darlings. We were the house band for 3 concurrent Whitney Biennial opening parties. We played all these gallery openings on West 14th Street and in Chelsea. That's how we met. We met DJ Spooky. We toured with DJ Spooky. We did a record with him. We met Elliot Sharp. We did a bunch of shows with Elliot Sharp. We did a bunch of shows with who else? Like a bunch of those guys, right? And it was like Arto Lindsay. We played with Arto Lindsay. And then we started playing at like Tonic and stuff like that.
Right.
And then there was a club / diner in the Lower East Side called Baby Jupiter that doesn't exist anymore, that did a lot of these kind of like drum and bass, like basement Bangra parties. And we had like a regular Friday night gig or Saturday night gig there for like a year. We played the Kitchen. We played like a bunch.
Yeah.
But I was the only guy of the 4. It was me and a woman named Rachel Finn and a guy named Stephen Krieger and a guy named Paul Foyer. And Rachel worked at Nonesuch Records, so she was sort of like a little bit in scene. She was the artist liaison at Nonesuch.
Got it.
So she was like the person who would have to take like the Buena Vista Social Club out to dinner.
Yep.
Right, or like meet the Kronos Quartet at the airport, like that kind of stuff. So she was plugged into that like emergent kind of contemporary classical. I think she was like an intern at Bang on a Can. So that's how I met those guys, was through her. But the other 2 guys, like one went to medical school and one got a grad degree in comp sci. Like they weren't necessarily like gonna be in the music industry all that long.
They weren't lifers.
Yeah, like, and I was in grad school. And so the whole thing kind of like fell apart around 2003 just because we got like too busy and everybody was like doing shit.
Okay, so that was a pretty long run then.
Yeah, we lasted for 6 years. We put out mid 90s. Yeah, it was like 96, 90s. Our first show was like the end of 96. And so we played for 6 years. We were on a label called Caipirinha. There was a sub-label for Sire Records.
Right. I remember.
And it was super fun. And it was like, I think now you call that stuff post-rock. They didn't call it that then, but we were in the bin with like Godspeed You Black Emperor. Right
next to Tortoise.
Yeah. I didn't know any of those guys. I didn't like really listen to that stuff, but that's where they stuck us.
So
like
what were you listening to at that point?
We were listening like jungle and stuff like that. We were listening like dance music and trying to figure out how to like reverse engineer like a bunch of that stuff.
So like were you trying to sound like Fort Hero or whatever?
Yeah, like a little bit, but then we were also trying to do this like steampunk thing and that's where it gets post-pop. Post-rock. So we were trying to do this like, steampunk is like the present imagining the past, imagining the future. Right. So steampunk is like guys in the 80s imagining what the Victorians would have thought the 22nd century would be. Right. And so we were trying to do the same thing. We were trying to be like, what would Mahler have thought music in 2200 or 2100 would be?
Okay.
Right. So we were like, okay, so it's going to be like, you got to have the cello because you got to have the cello.
But how did the didgeridoo feature?
But you also have the didgeridoo because at some point it's going to get into this like decolonial space of like all music from all cultures are valid and it's aggregate. And then you maybe have this analog electronic stuff and this computer stuff. So we had digital drum machines. We had like MPC, a high MPC sampler drum machines. Yeah. And then I had a buchla. Right. And then we had this.
So the buchla already in that era was its own kind of steampunk gesture.
Yeah, was its own kind of steampunk thing. Right. And it was in this it was very much like in the analog doldrums, right? It was like the late 90s. Nobody cared about those things because Eurorack hadn't happened yet. So there was basically like.
In the mid 90s, you didn't even have the first boom of the analog revival.
So there was basically us. Hrvatsky, Keith Phillips Whitman, right? Who was like, also around, also with that equipment, right? So he was the other guy I knew where I was like, that's a synthesizer. You have a synthesizer. I know what that is, right? Whereas like most people didn't have.
Well,
that.
he also had like you were both having like the capital S high synthesizer.
Yeah,
you were not using like bargain bin cut out rolling gear.
Yeah. He didn't have like a crowd.
You guys
had Buchlas.
Yeah. He didn't have, you're right. He didn't have like a Korg MS-20 that he bought used.
Right. Juno 106 was my inaugural.
Totally.
Sense.
And then there was this guy, Reed Hayes, who is an incidental music composer for Fox. And he had a band in town called C-Beams. And he had a Serge, and Moby had a Serge. So there were like four people in New York with
Reverb
Serges.
recently.
What?
I think Moby's Surge was on Reverb recently.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, that's possible. Yeah, it belonged to this guy. It belonged to this guy, Drew Schlesinger, who worked for like the Roland Corporation or something. He was a music industry lifer.
Right. He does sound design. He famously did the Black Hole.
Right.
Eventide.
That guy. And that guy's like kind of like at the NAMM show, right, in like LA. That guy's like awesome and famous and like really well regarded. Because I think he worked for like 10 companies. Right?
And he's been doing work with us at Moog for
so
sound
totally
design
cool
recently,
guy, right?
So.
And so I think Moby's Surge was his Surge.
Interesting.
Or something like that. I think he sold it. So those were like the four. Yeah. So there were like these four people in town, and mine was like borrowed. I think Keith's was also borrowed, right? Like he was stealing it from somewhere. And then
somewhere at Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard or wherever. And then this guy Reed, this Fox composer, actually owned one because he was a little bit older than us and clearly had a job. Right? Like when we hung out with that guy, he was like, he definitely had a job, right? Like he was like,
There's always that guy, the guy with a job.
No. Like he had like an Emmy nomination and he was like a very lovely guy, but he definitely like had a job. Yeah, and I thought that was really great. And I think in my head, I was like, I could have a job like that. And Mario Davidovsky, who is, when I was studying composition with him, encouraged me to have that job. His like neg to me always was, he was like, you make such beautiful sounds, you just don't know how to put them together. Isn't that a great line? He was like, you should be one of those guys who makes the sounds for the movies. You could like move to LA. You could date a pretty actress. It could be fun. Like, why do you want to be a composer?
Why didn't you, Luke?
Right? No, that was like his thing. He was so funny. He was
you could be working in the Hans Zimmer like sweatshop. You know?
Right. Or like, I think he was thinking I could be a Foley artist. He was thinking like I could be like at Skywalker Sound. I could be the guy figuring out.
I mean, fuck, that's a good gig.
Which is a good gig. Like figuring out,
yeah.
because I'm a little bit low key jealous of those guys. Like I remember when like the Lord of the Rings films came out. I had the special edition DVDs, which had all these extra features about the crew. And I don't know if you remember watching these, but it was like there would be these 2-ups where there would be like the CGI guys would be like, we were locked in the basement for 18 months at a time and bought every computer in the Southern Hemisphere. And we were in a sweat box. And Peter Jackson kept coming in being like, we need one more rendering. And we were like, and literally like everyone who knew how to program in the entire country of New Zealand was drafted into this. And I didn't see the daylight for 18 months.
Effort, right?
But then it cuts to the sound guys. And the sound guys are like, well, for the Balrog sound, we dragged a 4-ton boulder through a dry riverbed with these $40,000 Neumann surround microphones. And then we got done early and we went bass jumping. Right? Like that was them. You know what I mean? And you were like, what?
No joke. That's pretty much a dream job, right?
Yeah,
Like, and I was like,
incredible.
how did I not get this job? Like, I would love, because, like.
Wait. So,
Because think about it. Like, it's like with sound, that digital, like CGI, there's no CGA. There's no like computer generated audio equivalent at that time.
There sort of is now.
I know there sort of is now, but like, if you wanted, so like if you wanted to make an explosion, you could render it. But if you want to make the sound of an explosion, you actually had to blow something up and record it, right? And so the sound guys got to actually do that. Like they were forging, they had a blacksmith on staff for Lord of the Rings designing swords and then they would bust out a bunch of like Shep's capsule mics and hit the like what a cool job, right? So I don't
Go
know.
to the butcher and get some cows hanging.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
like
Go
what the
to
hell,
town.
man? Like why don't?
Wait, but so
I picked the wrong gig. Man.
Speaking of the path that you did choose,
Yeah.
we've kind of covered
Sorry.
incidentally a
We
bunch
keep
of your,
getting a bunch of tangents.
well, no, but tangents are the good stuff.
Yeah.
So you got to ask the boring questions to get to the good stuff.
Right.
So instead of becoming the Lord of the Rings Foley artist,
I know
you wound up working for Cycling 73.
I ended up
How did you land there?
No. So
What was it?
this is the thing. I started. So I did my undergrad at Columbia, then I went into the graduate program in composition there. My composition teacher was Fred Laerdal. Fred Laerdal was like, you have to go to one of these summer composition festivals. This is like 1998. Right. He was like, you have to go to one of these summer composition festivals. You can go to like June in Buffalo, Fontainebleau, Darmstadt, or like whatever the fuck the other one was, like Aspen or something like that. And I decided to go to June in Buffalo because it was cheap nearby. And they had a computer music thing going on that year.
So were you doing like standard-ish compositions during this period?
Yeah,
too?
I was doing
string quartets.
Yeah, I was doing like a little bit of that stuff, but I was also working on real-time CMix, which is like one of the synthesis languages they developed at Columbia. Okay. So that was like a C++ real-time performance language that was derived from Paul Lansky's mix program in the 80s at Princeton, which is a music end. So it all goes back to Max Matthews, right? So like it all goes back to Max Matthews Bell Labs, right? So it's a successor of, it's parallel to like C Sound, right? And we got it running in real time on the Silicon Graphics computer, and we were writing a bunch of stuff. And I was also doing some early MSP stuff, like Meg Shadell, do you know who that is, over at Stony Brook? She was my roommate in 1998, so she taught me MSP.
Okay.
And she was like, you need to get hip to this stuff and whatever. And I went up to Buffalo, and I met Miller Puckett. He was there, and David Ziccarelli from Cycling 74. And they were doing, so I was studying with like Davidovsky and Charles Warrenin and somebody else, I can't remember who. And, whatever, doing the composition lessons up there. And then at night, I was hanging out with these computer music guys because Cord Lipp taught there, Cord Lippy. And we were all hanging out. And I showed David Ziccarelli, like I was working on, do you remember Pluggo?
Yes.
Right? So there was this way to turn a Max patch into just like a conventional VST plugin,
that's right.
Which Long Trip Around the Sun is now possible again in Max because of Rainbow. But like back then, they had this thing. And so I showed David all the stuff I'd been working on, and I'd been working on this library of Max objects called Percolate with Dan Truman, who's now at Princeton. There was a port of the Karma synthesis toolkit, so the physical modeling algorithms from Perry Cook and Gary Scavone and Julia Smith. I ported all those to MSP.
Okay.
And we got them working. And so it was cool because it was like these VST synthesizers that would do like modal bar percussion and like plucked string, like the Karplus Strong algorithm and stuff.
And so this is circa 2000.
No, it was earlier. It was 98.
Okay.
It was like 98. And so like, or 99, whenever it was. And it was like my first year of grad school maybe. Okay. And I showed it to David. And I remember like, I just like totally just asked him for a summer job. I was like, hey man, can I have a summer job with you guys? And he was so funny because he was like, I don't think anybody's ever asked me for a summer job before. Like you're like a high school kid trying to get a job at the mall or something like that. Yeah, because I was like, yeah, I could write like documentation for you. I could ask. And I remember like, and then 3 months later or whatever, he wrote me and he introduced me to Josh Kid Clayton, who's one of the original Cycling 74 employees. Right. And then I went to Berlin I did a residency at Stein, and then I went to Berlin. And then I started working for Cycling 74, and I was originally their documentation kid. So I wrote the manual for like Max 4.5.
Okay. Like
the tutorials for JavaScript and like whatever, and Java and whatever.
Did you also work on the like in-app
Yeah.
tutorials?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah,
I did all that stuff with Chris Dobrian. And Gregory Taylor, and we worked on this whole thing. And then when they started the Jitter project, they moved me to engineering because I was coding on that.
Right.
Because I was also doing some intermedia stuff. Like I was writing. The big thing I was doing in grad school was I was trying to write like I was trying to write like visual music stuff. Like I was doing like kind of Kandinsky style synesthesia things. So I was doing things like you write a piece for guitar, you put the guitarist through a pitch tracker into a computer, and then you have the computer do like turtle graphic style whatever, like drawings based on the score.
Yeah, I was going to ask related to your work on jitter, like what the relationship between sound and image is in your practice.
Yeah, so I was really interested in that. I was interested in this, like, could you use live visuals as a way to decode or make transparent or elucidate like a musical score, right? Because by that point the kind of serialist wall had kind of cracked a little bit, and everybody was doing this kind of neo-minimalism stuff or whatever, and so there was a lot of opportunity, I thought, to be like, okay, we're all like suddenly super horny for these like repeating, overlapping structure things, but they're still to some degree opaque to the audience because you know, and I know that we're doing some kind of polyrhythm thing, but we're not going to like, write that down for them. So how do we show it? Right. And so I did a bunch of that stuff, and I got really into this guy named Aristide Lindenmayer, who was, you're going to love this, was a botanist.
Okay.
Who in the 60s created a Chomsky grammar, like a generative grammar, to describe how plants would grow, describe the morphology of plants.
Wow.
He basically was like convinced that there was an underlying system for how simple organisms grew, and he was alive at the right time to experience generative grammars from Chomsky, Watson and Crick discovering DNA, and Seymour Papert inventing turtle graphics, all within 5 years. And in this kind of like real stroke of brilliance, he jammed them all together and put out this book called The Algorithmic Beauty of Plants.
Amazing.
And it's basically code to describe how to make a fern, or how to make a tree, or how to make a flower, or whatever. And I was like, this is awesome. And I was studying with Fred Laerdal, who's like a generative theory of tonal music guy. So he was looking at Chomsky as an analytic tool to look at. His bug was he was trying to knife serialism from like the call is inside, coming from inside the building. So he was using this like Chomskyan linguistic critique of serialism by saying, okay, naturally evolved musical languages or musical cultures are like human languages. They have all the complexity and the nuance, and they have irregular verbs and things that don't make any sense and whatever. And that's what makes them beautiful. Serialism is like Esperanto, and nobody wants to listen to poetry in Esperanto. Right? So Babbitt kicked him out of Princeton. He was exiled from Princeton with a terminal MFA, and he became this kind of carbuncle on the side of the sinking ship that was academic serialism, to be like, you know, if we rewind the clock to 1920, nobody's going to care. Right. Like we can use notes and chords and keys again. And we can celebrate it now in this new postmodern context of like multiculturality, where we can say like this stuff can now sit alongside Indonesian gamelan, Carnatic music, whatever. And we can celebrate that all these things have in common is they're 2,000 years old.
Right.
And they're complex, right? And that was like his
perhaps still with a fundamentally kind of westernizing
lens.
like
he definitely had the westernized lens, but he was like, his whole point was that a guy in a basement in Vienna cannot create the future of music in a vacuum. As much as we think Schoenberg was a really fascinating guy, and the politics of serialism is really top notch, right? He was trying to take down Wagner. He's like, I am an Austrian Jew. This man does not represent me. Right? Like, I think that there's a bunch of things about the Serialist project that aren't all bad.
For sure. I mean, a lot of the music is incredible.
Yeah,
like, you can't deny that.
It just isn't going to replace the 2,000 years of triadic harmony and notes and chords and keys and whatever that we've all evolved, or any other musical system. And that was kind of Fred's thing. And so I was like, okay, so you're using these like generative grammar things as a proxy for like Riemann analysis and Schenker and stuff like that. You're going to try to do that. So what if I flip it? And I say, like, why don't we use generative grammars to try to write music? And I ended up basically making all this stuff that kind of sounds like B-list Steve Reich. Like, it's not necessarily good, but it was like a proof of concept, right? And I did this. I did a recital. Anthony Tomasini covered it for the New York Times. He called it an unconscionable waste of his time. which I think is the best review I've ever put to paper in.
That's almost untoppable. I mean,
Unconscionable. He called it an unconscionable waste of his time. And
Amazing.
I was really proud of that. And then I think at that point I realized, like, I'm not going to be like the guy with the New York Philharmonic Commission, but I might be the guy who develops a bunch of technology by which other people might make really interesting stuff, right? And
so this was your wake up call to shift your focus away from the academic domain of composition to like, I'm going to make shit, not
I'm going to just make stuff. And some of it is visual art, and a lot of it was art using data. I also, I got to meet at the very end of his life. I got to meet Xenakis.
I did like you mentioned to me at some point in our conversation, like offhandedly, like, when I was studying with Xenakis, and I was like, what?
Although it's it's like a misstatement to say I was he was very old and like dying, and I barely speak French, so like I wasn't really studying with him. I was just hanging out with him.
I mean, that's even
but
better,
like he did a big tour of New York in like 96, 97, did all these lectures at Connecticut College that we went up for. And I hung out with him a couple times at Princeton and in New York. And he was our like guest of honor or whatever at the 1997 Computer Music Conference that we did in Thessaloniki, Greece, and all this stuff. And, he was like, he had this whole like shtick about how if you have like a good artistic idea and you kind of know what you're doing, you should be able to like implement it in any medium. Like you should be able to make it into architecture or music or visual art or whatever.
Okay. Yep.
And like the polytope he wrote about, he called it the polytope. And he like wrote about this a ton, and he always like said it all the time. He was also a little bit in the whole like, why do you want to be a composer shtick? Like he was kind of like, you're like, what are you doing? That kind of stuff. And I was like, I'm just like doing like, I'm just taking sound. I was working on this piece where I had pathologically saved all of my voicemails, like all of my answering machine messages. So I had dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. Columbia, for some reason, had a digital voicemail system on their campus phone network. So I saved all my voicemails. Like
you dubbed them to like the mini tapes.
Yeah, I dubbed them to mini tapes. Yeah. And I would make people birthday presents where I would make these digital concrete mashups of all the voicemails they left me.
Amazing.
Right. So I'd make these little sound pieces that were like 5 minutes long. Where like, every time like, because, we had no cell phones back then. So like if you and I were going out to a bar, you would have left me a voicemail being like, hey, Luke, it's Sean. I'm leaving in 20 minutes. So I would take all those.
It's impossible to think about that now.
Yeah. So I would take all those and like run them into the next machine, run them through a whole bunch of like Paul Lansky-ish comb filters and stretch them and pile them up. And then on your birthday party, I would give you a CD.
Beautiful.
And it would have this cool birthday present. And I did it for all my friends, right? I did it for like, all the people I was buddies with. And I showed that to Xenakis, who was kind of like, he was like, that's very charming and very lovely. And I think it is wonderful that you have the space in your like creative time to like do these things. There is no mass appeal for this project. Like there is no scenario. Like he was like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like there's no scenario where 10,000 people at Carnegie Hall give you a standing ovation because you stretched a bunch of answering machine messages of like your roommate and your girlfriend and your drinking buddies. That's just not a thing. He was like, sorry if you think that's a thing. And I was like, no, I get it. Right. And whatever. But I don't know. I started thinking about like visual art. And what happened was Bang on a Can asked me to do this project. The first like record thing I did for them was they did this remix in 2004. So this is now like I'm almost done with grad school. Or I'm done with grad school. They did this remix project in 2004 of Handel's Messiah. They put out Cantaloupe put out this record called Messiah Remixed, where they commissioned like 20 card-carrying members of the New York Avant-Garde or whatever to remix Handel's Messiah as a Christmas album. Right? They licensed.
This is such like 2000s none such.
Yes.
And
I was one of them, right? So I was one of them. And so, and it's everybody. You know all these people. It's me and like Eve Buglerian and, it's all the usual people. And it's totally lovely and I don't know. It's a cool record. But the thing was, Kenny Savilson, the guy who was managing the label, put us all on an email to basically hash out how we were going to divvy up Handel's Messiah. And all anybody fucking knows about Handel's Messiah is the Hallelujah chorus. So that's all anybody wanted. So I decided instead to take the whole fucking thing and speed it up to 5 minutes. And I created this kind of phase vocode smeary technique that I call time-lapse phonography. And I was basically what if you took a long exposure photograph, but sound, so it all smears together? And so I made this 5-minute drone thing.
Sweet.
And I was like, this is really cool. And then I started doing that to everything.
It's kind of like it's like a reverse Paul stretch or something.
Yeah, it's a reverse Paul stretch. And so I did this piece called Billboard. That was take every number one song and speed it up to 1 second for every week it's at number one. So in 37 minutes, you get the whole history of the American pop chart from 1958 to 2000. I did it to video. So I took every Academy Award Best Picture and sped it up to 1 minute each, strung them together. I did a thing where I centered all the Playboy Playmates of the month and put them in a picture frame. And I started showing with a gallery called Bitforms. It's a media art gallery. And I started doing media art about data. I started doing American portraiture through data. And sort of ignored the music stuff for almost 10 years. I sort of did all this visual art. And the only music I was really doing was I was anachronistically writing my own music for the soundtracks for those things.
Okay.
But I was doing all this weird video shit. And then, long fast forward, 2015, I kind of 2016, I guess. It was when Trump got elected the first time. And 2015, when Mike Brown was shot in Ferguson, I did this big project with DeRay McKesson about online activism and Black Lives Matter. And I did this piece about gun violence called Take a Bullet for This City. It was a gun that fires, and anywhere you put in any city and listen to the 911 feed, and it fires anytime someone's shot in your city. So I was doing all this activist kind of data art stuff. And I basically was I don't think I have anything. It wasn't I didn't have anything to say, but I was it is no longer productive for a guy who looks like me to be talking about this stuff. I need to stop talking for a minute and listen. Mm-hmm. And so I stopped making stuff for a while. It's still a while. It's 2026. It's been 10 years. And I was I don't know, what have I got kicking around that I love that's fun? And I was synthesizers. I'm going to go back and start making synthesizers again. And I started making synthesizers again, right? And I built this lab over here at Tandon. And around the same time, Serge Shrepnin, our old buddy, came out of retirement and was these things are now available again.
Wait, so
right? Yeah.
I did want to, this dovetails, I'm going to skip over one kind of question perhaps for now, but this does lead into the kind of next zone of questions, which is about Serge. And I was wondering what your entry point to Serge was, which you've explained a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess immediately this just brings up the question. So were you were in contact with Serge back in the 90s, when you were?
Yeah, only
you were one
once,
of the 4
though,
Serge users in New York.
Yeah, I was one of the 4. So
right.
we all had. I was one of the 4 people who had access to one of those things. We had him at Columbia. I knew Rex Probe, who was his, amanuensis, who kept running the company after he retired.
Ran STS.
Yeah, ran STS. So we would break the surges and then have him fix them.
Right.
So I knew him just by phone. I never met the guy, but we would call him and be we fucked up our TKB. Can you fax us
playing a drum and bass show?
Can you fax us a quote and we will FedEx you the it was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I knew Kevin Fortune, who's one of the repair guys, and he fixed a bunch of stuff for the Computer Music Center, right? And so we knew about him. But I only knew Serge. I only had a back and forth with Serge Cherepnin once because I literally wrote him a piece of fan mail in college.
Amazing.
I got his mailing address, I think from Subotnik or something like that. Somehow I figured out how to write to him in Paris. And I wrote him this note, and he wrote me a very brief note back being Luke, thanks, that made my day or whatever. And like, that was it. Right. And that was it. Right. And I was like, cool, he's alive. Right. Like, cause it's like, there's no way to stalk these people in 1995. They're not on Facebook.
Right.
There's no like, internet, so it was like, for me, it was like trying to get a hold of like, in my head, it was like trying to get a hold of like fucking J.R.R. Tolkien in the 60s. I was like, I'm trying to write to some mythical guy.
Right.
And by that point, I had
Serge really fell off the map.
because he felt
really
that, he's
dropped
like
off the map by that
86. So
time.
like what happened was, long story short, all of these guys were in their own domain, not particularly successful businessmen.
Yes.
You can read Ted Gordon's book. What it would, like we do a pitch for Ted Gordon's book, but he talks about it. But basically, they all got wiped out through either their own inability to project their product management cycle beyond one product. So that's what happened to ARP. They spent $1 million designing a guitar synthesizer, and 10 people bought them. Right? Moog had a pathological obsession with being the Rolls Royce of the system, but at the instant that you have stagflation like happened in the 1970s, you can't be the Rolls Royce if nobody's even buying a Toyota. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So like that was like the first iteration of Moog really like struggled with that. Right. Buchla got into, brought a knife to a gunfight with CBS. Right. And lost. Right. So like Buchla spent, the 90s in the wilderness making MIDI controllers. And Serge, his mistake, to his telling, is he had a satisfaction guaranteed at cost 100% lifetime guarantee repair policy. So if you bought a Serge, you could mail it to him when it broke and he would fix it for parts and labor and send it back to you. So by 1986, he was doing 10 times as many repairs as sales, which meant he was losing money because you only buy one Serge. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So like he basically did the equivalent of LL Bean. Right. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like LL Bean is this like beloved Maine sportswear thing where they have a lifetime guarantee on all their things. But like that doesn't work when you're a small indie shop with 4 employees. Yeah. Right. And so he couldn't sustain it. And so he tossed the keys to Rex and retired to Paris in 86. And
I mean, the picture's broader than that too. Though there were shifting changes in consumer habits.
Absolutely,
and,
there was a DX7 in the corner,
and the DX7 wiped out everybody, and all that. So all of that stuff was true. There were like these other pressures, but like the tactical like business flaw in Serge in SMMS or whatever, like Serge Modular Music Systems, was he had this like no questions asked repair policy that was slowly destroying his cash flow. Right. And he had no way to get around that or whatever because he didn't want to let his customers down. Right. Some of his best customers were the people he was doing repairs for, like universities. Right. So Serge also the reason why there's Serge systems all over the place in Australia was like, Australia had protectionist tariffs on completed electronics equipment. It was aimed at Japan. Right. Okay. But it was like whatever. So if you wanted to buy a Moog, it would have cost twice as much, but a Serge was a kit. So it was it was tariff exempt, which is why every Australian university has Serge equipment.
Interesting.
Right. And that's how you get that guy, Ken Stone.
I was going to say that
right. Those
that
guys,
explains Ken Stone in one sentence.
Those guys were the authorized builders of Serge equipment in Australia and New Zealand. Right. So like, he had these things, but he didn't like kind of diversify enough. And so, I was really into a Serge because we were playing with it in the freight, and I loved it, and I thought they were amazing, and I loved that they didn't have. There were all these things I loved about them. I loved that they looked cool. Yeah,
I was going to ask just straightforwardly what resonated so strongly
there's
with you
like,
in that moment.
Yeah, like they
the
just
stuff.
They look cool. There's no right way to use them. There's no wrong way to use them. Half the time you patch it and just God knows what. Like I had no idea what I was doing. We had that Rich Gold book and I never read it. I like would kind of flip through it and be like, yeah, whatever. And I would just try to figure it out.
And so the system you had was the 76 stuff, not the paper face.
It wasn't a paper face. Right. Columbia has 2 matched late 70s anodized aluminum, like 3rd generation Serge systems.
Okay. So I think that's probably like what is Bard has 2 systems. Mm-hmm. There's one of the later 70s, and then there's a like spectacularly decrepit paper face.
Yeah. So Usachevsky bought a Serge anodized system off of Serge, after they bought basically like Ussachevsky bought a Buchla 100 series, then he bought a Buchla 200 series. Then he realized Buchla was charging him an outrageous amount of money. Then he switched brands to Serge. And then he bought 2 Serges. And Ussachevsky was a very like conservative electronic musician. So he bought possibly, if you go look at that system, it is the least sexy Serge system on the planet. There's no wave shapers. There's no wave folders.
Oh, no.
There's just oscillators, filters,
it's just 12
VCAs.
PCOs.
There's just
like...
VCOs, VCAs.
Doing the
filters.
thing that Serge does worst.
Yeah. Like it's really like the very vanilla. It's the most vanilla possible system, and it has a TK.
Wow.
They have 2 TKBs. And
not to knock Serge's, the filter designs are
no,
of
it's
course
fine.
brilliant, but
it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's like, and they had new timbral oscillators and whatever.
That's not what you get into Serge to
yeah.
do. So.
And he was, and that's what they had, and that's what all I thought there was. Like, so that's what I learned on, and that's what I toured with. And so, like, all of that weird, like, squonky, like, wave folding shit wasn't actually in my Serge vocabulary until like way later
until
when I
2
realized
decades later almost.
Yeah, when I realized like, oh, that's like why people like this thing. It has nothing to do with I liked it because of the dual universal slope generator and how you had this weird polyvalent fucked up envelope generator. And so what I could do, this is how we synchronized it to the MPC 2000 and the DR60 drum machine. I would take the individual outs of those things, crank the shit out of them through a Sans amp, like a Tech 21 guitar pedal, like guitar cab pre, to make it almost but not quite a square wave. And then I would shove it into the trigger of the universal slope generator, and that would get me a clock.
Amazing.
That I could synchronize. So I would take the hi-hat and I would blitz it, and it would be like, and then that's how we would synchronize all the drums to the synths.
I mean, the thing is, like, that's actually a little easier to do in a Serge environment than some other similar.
And it was like way easier than building or getting a MIDI to CV converter box. Like, I don't even know how I would have stumbled across one of those in 1995.
I mean, in 95, like the Kenton stuff probably existed.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Somebody must have had one, but like I think the guy from C-Beams, the Reed Hayes had stuff like that. He had all this really high-tech digital integration equipment, but I didn't. So like whatever. So I distorted the hi-hat. And then our other plan was I had a Yamaha portable like AA battery like composer MIDI keyboard, a QI-20, and that thing had a god-awful trumpet sound on it that I realized could trigger the Serge. Like if you put in the clock input on the sequencer, it would advance the sequencer. So I would write these sequences where it was like and it was kind of like
the
using
trumpet,
an SH101.
not the oboe.
Yeah. So you know how like there's a following clock on the SH101 that you can like arbitrarily sync. So you would like program. Yeah. That's how you do like the Chicago house bass lines. You do like a 4-note bass line over like a 5-note hi-hat.
Chris and I know the SH101 and Chicago.
So I was kind of
Chicago acid
No, that's it. So I was kind of like doing that trick where I would write like a hi-hat part that would kind of skitter around and use that to advance the TKB. And I just made sure that the number never added up to 16, and it would create these cool interlocking rhythms, right?
You could kind of
and it would
polymetric.
I would polymetric it, and that was like our hack. Anyway, basically, like 2018 or whatever, started building this lab because I teach. So I don't teach in a music department. I teach in the design program for NYU's engineering school. And so the big thing we do is we do design research, we do UX, we do a lot of emphasis on accessible design and design for disability.
Yeah, this is some stuff I wanted to get to.
We do some really fun stuff
in a little
like
bit.
that.
Yeah,
we do some really fun stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, we need an audio research lab. What audio are we going to research? And my 2 adjunct faculty for this program are Michael Schumacher and Kato Hideki, who both play modulars, right? And so I was like, well, let's do like let's do a synth thing.
Yep.
And, it can be like hybrid digital. We could do like Max MSP stuff. We could do whatever. It could be like really fun, and whatever. And then I met Darren Weiner, the Patch Point guy. He was in New York making a sale. I don't really remember, but like I
probably coming to see us at Control.
Yeah.
Possibly coming to see you at Control.
I think that's
it's like
likely,
this is like 2017, 2018.
If it was peak Euro-Rack years, then he was here for one reason.
And he was
Control.
he was here like hanging out with you probably and like doing whatever. And I met him, and and he's like an Oberlin guy. Like he knew Zach Layton. We had a bunch of friends in common. I coffee with him. And I was like, yeah, at Columbia, I use Serges and whatever. And he's like, well, you can get them again. And I was like, what are you talking about? Right? Because I was like, because I was like, you mean like Rex? I can call Rex? And he's like, well, no, you could call. I mean, yeah, you could call that guy. But, there's these guys in Berlin. There's this guy, Rafe Hoffman. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then he showed me the website. And I was like, whoa. No fucking way.
I mean, in 2017, there were already a bunch of ways to get back into before you search.
So,
but this was when the Random Source were making the kits, and the cool thing that Darren would do is
build them.
And we bought them from him. Is he would give us kits, so basically you could get a VCFQ or something, the Eurorack faceplate, the boards, and then he would just populate it with all of the parts.
Yeah.
So we could sell that to people, and it's like, hey, you have the soldering iron. You don't even have to do the parts building, the parts buying. You just buy this kit. It has everything you need.
Yeah. Yep.
You put it together, and that was how, like, especially I really, built so much stuff, was because it was pretty cheap, pretty accessible, and like you can't destroy it. I mean, it'll work.
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah. So that's what you're saying exactly right, Chris. It's like, so I met Darren, and I was like, and I asked him, I was like, can you build me a Serge? And he was like, you bet. Right. And so we commissioned a 4-panel patch point, like random source kit sourced Serge. And that was the first one we got. Right.
And I've seen them. They have the like, is that like zebra wood or something in the cases? That really,
so it's a Ross Lamond wood boat panel thing, whatever, like floor, whatever. So I got that, and then I got populated kits from him as well, so the students would have something to build. And then he built me a TTSH, right, one of those open source ARP 2600s,
right? Yeah.
And that's when we like actually put some intentionality into the room, where we were like, okay. Because like a big theme of the IDM program, the program that I run, is about like open source tools for the arts, media equity, like getting things in the hands. And I was like, okay, so instead of me saving up for a rainy day and buying a bunch of Buchla shit and a bunch of Moog shit, why don't I celebrate the two guys who came after, who were trying to get them in the hands of more people? So let's make it about Serge and ARP, right? Let's make the room about Serge and ARP. Because they had very different ideas about how to do it, but they had this kind of shared goal. Serge Cherubnin has confirmed this to me, and Dina Perlman, Al Perlman's daughter, has confirmed this. They were aware of each other. They were both very aware that they were like had this shared objective of, to a certain degree,
the people synthesizer,
to a certain degree, undercutting Moog and Buchla so that it could be in the hands of high schools, and independent musicians and independent composers, right? So Serge's approach was the people synthesizer, like, let's make a DIY kit, let's value engineer the shit out of the manufacturing things with the pre-drilled plates and the banana jacks and the 5-volt range and make it all cheaper. ARP was like, let's build a 40,000 square foot warehouse outside of Boston and use Fordist assembly line techniques and really lean into integrated circuits to make everything cheaper. So they were both doing this kind of like parallel value engineering process.
That is really interesting too. That like they have parallel, but also like totally like obverse methodologies there, right? Like
they have obverse methodologies.
Serge assiduously DIY. Like let's we're going to put the production into the hands of the people. Whereas
and so Serge was thinking, Heathkit Radio. ARP was thinking like the consumer electronics industry revolution in the late 60s of like your Fisher Price record player.
Absolutely.
And your Pioneer LP, your Pioneer stereo or whatever. Like just bringing the cost way down. And and they both did a lot of what we would now call like, stakeholder research, like market research. Like Serge hung out with a lot of composers, ARP hung out with a lot of rock stars, possibly too many rock stars, which is how he ended up with like the debacle that was the Avatar in the late 70s. Right.
We're definitely going to have Dina on at some point.
Yeah, she's lovely.
I've chatted with her a bunch. She's a
and
sweetheart.
Brilliant. And her father was a brilliant man and a very kind man. He donated his equipment to every high school in the Boston area. I have the Newton Mass ARP 2600, right? Like, I think that guy, I think the world of that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Serge like was kind of on the same tip. He was like, I don't everybody should have one of these stupid things, because
Yeah.
it's just that's how you make it this utilitarian future of music device, right? Is you get it in the hands of people who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's cool. Right. And so those guys, so then we started building it, and then I started repairing them, and now I have way too many of them.
when we wrap, we'll give you a little.
Yeah, you should come over, Chris, but you'll see. Yeah, I have a lot of surges.
I'll start walking.
I have a lot of surges. It's upsetting. I have an upsetting amount of surge modular equipment.
But no, there is.
I mean,
there is
hey.
no amount of surges that would be upsetting.
I was just trying to do just trying to get something to work earlier today for this video series I do, and I was like, shit, I need one more CV processor.
Come over. I have like 9 of those.
You always need one more.
Yeah. I have like several of them in boxes. We can make you another one. Yeah. No, I mean, I have like a lot of surges. And I also met John Ensign, right, the human comparator guy. So I have a complete set of those paper-face reissues.
I wanted to ask. So was the kind of mid-late tens Serge DIY boom your like entry point to DIY synthesis?
Yeah, I mean, I like ish. Like that was definitely when I started building them, knowing there were synthesizers. At Columbia, I repaired them.
Okay.
So like at Columbia, I repaired Buchla modules,
Okay.
and I worked on the Serge, and I recapped things and whatever. So I knew a little bit of that stuff. But really, I was like a computer guy more. Like I knew Maximus P,
right,
and stuff like that, right?
There's a question that I wanted to get to in a little bit, but I think we should jump to it now.
Yeah.
You have this huge background with both Serge and Max. Something that's come up kind of a few times recently on the podcast has been the kind of the omnipresence of and importance of the analog and digital divide, or the synthesizer and computer music divide.
Right.
It was such a big thing in the 90s and especially the aughts.
Yeah, it was a big thing.
And so you have like these extensive backgrounds in both of these worlds. I mean, what do you make of that divide? Like, it's something that I feel like has sort of been kind of overcome in a way. It's not as prevalent as it was.
I mean, one thing that is helping is, and you guys would know this better than me because you're much more deep into like the scene a little bit, but one thing I've casually observed is like the historicized like hyper fetishization of like these older analog devices is a little bit like eased back now. And so like people, are now aware, like I'm buying this Eurorack stuff, and in that Eurorack stuff is a thing called a daisy. And that daisy is made by this company called Electrosmith, and that's a Max patch. Right. Or like I have an Ornament in Crime. That's a Teensy. Right. That's a closed source competitor to the Arduino microcontroller. Right. That is good at like doing like digital audio. Right. And
like a lot of the sort of like after the first kind of wave of Eurorack stuff. You do get in the mid 2010s like the peaking of Mutable, which is open source,
which is open source,
which people were that really opened up a lot of things for people to be sort of making their own things.
Yeah, so people can like do really interesting things now that's like that are hybrid. So we have I teach a class called Analog Heaven, with a woman named Kelly Heaton, who's a visual artist who makes circuits that look and sound like birds. They're discrete component transistor oscillators. She works with Cornell Ornithology. The canary still sounds like a canary. The nightingale sounds like a nightingale, but they're precision discrete oscillators, right?
Hell yeah.
And so we teach
integrates perfectly with your Merlin app on your phone.
Exactly. So that's a test. It'll confuse a Merlin app. Right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so she and I teach this class, but a lot of the students integrate digital tools into that stuff. So we build these things called shelficizers, which are just re-drilled rack shelves, like 4U rack shelves, where we face them with Serge jacks and bury Arduinos in them. One of the million reasons why it's fun to use Serge in an academic, like engineering environment is the voltage range is compatible with like TTL logic on microcontrollers. It's 0 to 5 volt with a common ground. So you can just take an Arduino and have it talk to the Serge, and you don't need to do any other interstitial anything other than a buffer. right? It's really easy. So, and you don't even need to do a buffer if you don't care really. But like, you know what I mean? Whereas interfacing with like line level or like Eurorack level equipment is actually like a little bit harder.
Right.
You have to think about like how to do a voltage divider and like a level shifter and like all this crap. You don't have to do that with an Arduino with Serge, because Serge is so forgiving about like what's audio, what's control voltage. It doesn't really care.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, what happens is like if you know, like this is Serge's, but you guys know this, if you take like something out of a blue jack DC voltage or something out of a red jack, which is like binary voltage, and shove it into a black jack, which is AC voltage, that means there's a DC blocking capacitor in there that's just going to re-level it all for you. And then it's just sound.
Right.
You just plug it into speakers and won't hurt your speakers. Right. And so that stuff is like really nice in that way. And so the kids can just like fuck around and they're not going to hurt anything. But back to your question about that analog digital divide, you know, that was the beautiful thing about the Computer Music Center at Columbia, because they didn't throw out this stuff. So like the guy, my teaching assistant in grad school was this guy, James Fay, who was probably the most like analog fluent person there. So he really knew how to like rip apart all the circuit boards and make sense of them and like restore the Ampex tape pre's, and like he did all this stuff. We had a ridiculous 1950s Albus filter, like a West German radio, like don't move the slider too fast.
Oh, cool.
Like the kind of thing that would be on like a Heinbach show.
Sure, yeah.
Like, you know, where he would be like, and this is my pre-war bandpass filter, right? Like whatever. Like it was like one of those. We had one of those, and like, you know, James got it working again. Like that was
How'd
like
it sound?
Like awesome, but also it had a handwritten note on it from Usachevsky being like, "Do not play this emotionally," which I thought was awesome, right? So he knew all.
Every synthesizer needs that note.
So he knew how to do all that stuff way, way, way better than me. I knew more like the computer shit,
right?
But when I got back around to this, I've been like learning it fast. The thing that's really fun about the students now, though, especially here, is because I'm not part of NYU's 3 music departments. I'm like the demilitarized zone of NYU's 3 music departments. So the kids from our music technology group, which does kind of research grade music technology, the people from the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music, which is like a BFA recording arts degree, and the students from like this thing called the Waverly Studios, which are like the standard academic computer music PhD people. Right, all hang out here,
right,
and they get to like use it, and we get to do like design research around this stuff, and yeah, it's like.
But you're not beholden
fun
to the interests or concerns of.
No, I get to like make my own narrative around it. So like, I teach this graduate class called the Sound Studio, and in the Sound Studio, your job is to pick a thing that you have discovered is important to the music you like to listen to. So I had a student 3 years ago create like a Motown style plate reverb using using an IKEA shelving unit.
Hell yeah.
Transducers and humbucker pickups.
Beautiful.
Right? Because like that works, right? I had a student rip apart a graphic EQ to try to make a vocoder, right? Using Vactrols to multiply the like EQ channels, right? Which is a cheap way to make a vocoder.
Amazing.
But I also had a student who like lovingly reverse engineered Trent Reznor's college bedroom studio through archives and interviews, right?
It.
So like by like reading all these interviews, you can figure out at Case Western Reserve in 1987.
That's so good.
Right? Trent Reznor had a Fostex or like a Tascam 424 real like 4-track cassette recorder. He had a Mac LC2
did
driving
they remake Pretty Hate Machine? No.
So that's what he did. He bought all the stuff on eBay, got a working key disc for TurboSynth, which was brand new at the time, right? Which was the quasi Max that rendered samples.
Okay.
Which is the key to Trent Reznor's sound. He would record a guitar sample and put it through a wave shaper, right?
Yeah.
And he created like a 4-track like authentic sounding Nine Inch Nails demo tapes.
Sick.
And that
of
was
his own material.
Of his own material. He just made shit up, right? And
Sounds
it was
great.
instrumental. He didn't sing, but he like played guitar, did the drum beats on the SR16. He got
No one can write lyrics as
like,
bad as Trent Reznor with a straight face.
fine.
So it
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like
well, now he can do the AI. He can go into his AI singing companion profile and choose Trent.
Totally. So grim. But it was like killer.
Yeah, that sounds
like
amazing.
it was it was so killer. I wasted like a good week of my life trying to do some 6 Degrees of Freedom thing, trying to get to Trent Reznor, because I was like, I must know somebody who's friends with Atticus Ross, right? Like you know, like between us,
we actually could have got you in touch with.
Oh
Trent,
yeah,
probably.
like we know a guy who knows a guy who went to grad school with like his buddy who went to school for composition. So like we have a way, right? So I was like trying to get, because I was convinced he would have thought it was cool.
Yeah.
Because it was really cool. Like, you know, especially because there's no extant interview of Trent Reznor with that inventory just listed. Like the guy really did like investigative journalism.
That's great.
Because he was like, oh yeah, in Sound on Sound magazine, he mentioned this. Oh, in this like Guitar for the Practicing Musician article, he mentions this.
This is why every university needs a Reznor studies program.
A Reznor study. But it was like, I was really like proud of the guy.
No, it's sick.
Because like he didn't just Google shit, right? Like, you know, and whatever. But I had a student like mock up a Fairlight CMI using Max, like the Kate Bush machine, like just trying to figure out the times, you know, like trying to simulate the UI, and made the little waterfall plot thing with the fake light pen using a Wacom tablet. And that was like really lovely.
I think that's probably easier than getting the Fairlight at NYU
working. Well, that's what we found. So they have 2 of them in a closet with all the tape decks, and that was, you know, we like looked at it, and she was like, no, I love this stuff. And it was right when like Kate Bush had that because of Stranger Things, right? Where like suddenly she was like a triple platinum artist again. And like everybody was like, oh my God. And that is like a genius record.
Of course.
It's just she's a genius,
it's
right? She like sampled her own voice to make her background vocals as played on keyboards, right? Like that's just like, right? It's super smart.
The production is
super smart.
Unparalleled.
Yeah, just super smart.
Record. Yeah.
And so, so I had a student who was like, how do I get that sound? And I was like, okay, you have to like knock everything down to like 12-bit 32K or whatever the fuck it is. You know, we like got the manual, and I was like, figure this out and whatever. And we got a hold of like Kim Ryrie, one of the Fairlight guys in Australia, is still around.
Wow.
We Facebook stalked him because he's friends with you know, what's his name? Your man Robin Fox, like the mess guy. Right. So we like 2 Degrees of the Melbourne Electronic Sound Studio guy.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Right. So we like 2 Degrees of Freedom'd him and like found
I don't think he's my guy, but
we found Kim Ryrie and was like, hey, can you do a Zoom with my student to talk about the Fairlight? And he was like, all right, love that. Right. So like, you know, whatever. You know, when you reach out to these guys and they still are around, they want to talk about it.
Yes.
Right. Like they're interested in it. And so that's been like also like fun is, you know, I talked to Serge on Zoom, and I'm like, you know, hey man, tell me about that thing. And he's like, well, there's not that much to say. And I'm like, try. Like, you know,
please,
like, just try me. Just go for it. But he's really lovely, and I think it's really lovely that he's having this moment where all these people are making his shit.
It's beautiful.
I think that's really nice. Nobody, you know, whatever.
I wanted to, since we're on the IDM tip right now.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of disability interface stuff that you've been working on here.
Yeah, so the biggest research shop we have in the program, which we run with 2 other departments, we run it with the ITP program at Tisch and the occupational therapy program at NYU Steinhardt, is we run this thing called the NYU Ability Project. It is America's largest standing research initiative around technology and the social model of disability, which is a posh way of saying, I'm not fixing you, I'm fixing the shit you use and the places you go.
Yep.
And so we do a lot of stuff around adaptive design, accessible design, very broad application space. So we get grants to look at museum accessibility.
Mhm.
We've done product audits. We did a big project for Charter, your friendly neighborhood cable television monopoly, where we took their whole product line and wrote them like a 600-page engineering design teardown of all of the like disability issues, accessibility issues around their remote controls and their Roku interface and their whatever. So like we have students trained in this. And a couple years ago, we started working with the FMDG school. Do you know what this is, Chris?
No.
Yeah, exactly. The FMDG school is the oldest school for blind musicians in the United States. It dates to 1905.
Damn.
And you've
Where's
never heard of it, and I had never heard of it because until 15 minutes ago, it was capital C classical. It was Juilliard string faculty teaching using oral tactile Suzuki method, blind kids, cello, right? And they got a new executive director a few years ago who discovered electricity and was like, oh my God, what about synthesizers? What about recording equipment, right? A student, a visually impaired musician in the year of our Lord 2026 cannot record themselves and put their music online. And they have no ability to use contemporary technology. And that's really a shame because in the 70s, that probably wasn't true, right? Stevie Wonder could have used a recording studio because nothing is being moved around and there's no screens.
Yeah.
And all of the affordances on analog recording equipment are direct drive to the circuit board. So they're all tactile, right? You have no soft buttons scrolling through lights.
Yeah.
They're actually pushing a switch.
Yeah.
So you can feel your way around. So like he could have absolutely used a desk and a reel-to-reel, recording device and all that stuff. And maybe you braille a patch bay and whatever. And Bob's your uncle, right? But now you can't, right? And so we started this initiative. We have a amazing student at NYU Steinhardt who we work with named Maddie Mao, who's a blind, keyboard player who does stuff with synthesizers. And Jason, my designer in residence, Jason Wallach, and a bunch of my grad students, a woman named Sierra Black, and a woman named
Sierra is
Sierra's your buddy,
a buddy of both Chris and
right?
I
And a woman named Moira Zhang, who's my grad assistant, and I have a postdoc named Stephanie Kosif, and we're basically looking at an all hands on deck, multiple point of entry way to think about making synthesizers accessible. Particularly one affordance per function analog synthesizers, whether they have a screen or not, right? And so we're doing everything. So like coming up with shorthands for Braille, so you can put Braille on it, easy, right? Coming up with tactile guides, like using swell form, like UV raised print to make like a tactile thing where you can move your hand around and feel what's on the synthesizer and have the full Braille labels, right? Because often the user interface on an analog synthesizer is packed too tight for Braille. There's no such thing as small Braille or big Braille. There's just Braille. It's an international standard. So you can't Braille Euro rack equipment because the spacing of the jacks is too tight.
Right.
But you can Braille Serge equipment, right? Because it's big enough that in between the jacks you can fit a line of Braille, right? So if you have and that's a blind spot, no pun intended, in the Eurorack specification. By picking a 3U standard, they inadvertently committed themselves to a very, very, very tight form factor implied in the UI design of those modules where you'll never be able to get Braille in there. But you could do other things. Like you can put little tactile single dots, or you can do tactile overlays. So we've been doing things like 3D printing different shaped jacks that can clasp on to a 3.5 millimeter, so you can feel whether it's an input or an output, or you could feel whether it's CV or audio, and then you have a tactile guide that mirrors it, right? So you do stuff like that. So we're looking at that. For modern synthesizers that have microcontrollers in them and they send MIDI, a lot of modern analog synthesizers send MIDI NRPNs back to a MIDI host for live automation purposes or editor librarian. So we've designed a speech synthesizer standard for that. So you move a knob on your Prophet 6 and it'll say filter, cutoff, filter, resonance, attack, decay, sustain, release, right? All that stuff. But we've also done weird DIY stuff. We've been hacking refreshable Braille displays, like those things that a blind person would feel into a guitar pedal form factor that takes MIDI to overcome the 7-segment LED on your synth. So if you have a synth with like a 7-segment LED like array in the corner telling you your preset, you could feel the preset number, right? And then we've also been doing weird stuff, like we've been building these little Vactrol coin cell ERM vibrating units that you can clamp them onto the blinking LFO on a module on a synth like an SH-101, and it'll buzz in time with your LFO.
Oh, that's great.
So it's just like
Cool.
bzz, bzz, bzz. So we've been doing stuff like that. So for Serge, Jason in there is 3D printing. We'll show you on the way out, like different shapes for like the different red jack, black jack, blue jack input output.
You were just mentioning me on
things.
the way up. Yeah, it looks
Super cool.
Sounds great.
Like, so we've been like looking at, because there's no such thing as universal design. There's like universal designs, right? So you have to like give everybody a bunch of ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's an amazing guy in the UK named Jason Descent, who's a British Trinidadian pop producer who's blind, who does amazing stuff with digital accessibility. So he's the accessibility consultant for Native Instruments and for Apple on the Logic group and for Novation on their equipment and the Focusrite group, right? So he and I are colluding to try to do a big accessibility booth at the NAMM show next year.
That's amazing.
Right. We're, and Dave Gibbons, who's been our best friend on this, who's the president of Sequential Circuits, right? After Dave Smith passed away, the new guy who's the new boss, he's just amazing. And he was basically like, look, man, if you guys can create the standard and the infrastructure and the spec, a company can just bake it into their product development line. If all we have to do is take the CAD file and make an optional Braille overlay
Right.
and make a JSON file that's available on the website for the speech synthesizer mapping, we just bake it into the product checklist.
Right.
Like, this is the thing
Yeah.
you also have to add a lot, like somewhere in between making the Japanese manual
Right.
and doing the whatever, we got to like crank out these 2 additional things. It's like 10 hours of engineering time tops.
Yeah.
Why would we say no to that? That is a substantial number of potential additional customers.
Yeah.
And you basically say to the music industry, like, why didn't you do this in the 80s, basically?
Yeah.
Like, you could have done this in the 80s. And I think the best way to get anything done in the music technology industry is to make it deeply uncool not to do it.
Right.
So they, Oberheim, Sequential, Novation, which are like the Focusrite group synthesizer companies, are just going to be very loudly and proudly featuring speech synthesis is like a thing that their synth can do.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And Braille overlays is a thing that their synth can do. And then we're, doing it our own way with the modulars and trying to make a bunch of standards on GitHub.
Amazing.
And it's super fun. And it's really awesome so like the equivalent that I always talk about is the automobile industry never competes on safety. They collaborate on safety. So like Toyota does not hide their airbag designs from Mercedes-Benz. They publish them. Right? Like all automotive safety stuff is effectively open source. It's an open source collaborative initiative, with the notable exception of this automobile company in America called Tesla that you may have heard of. Tesla is the only American auto manufacturer that hides their safety protocols.
Oh, I wonder why.
Well, it's weird because they're famously very safe.
I know they're
vehicles.
famously very, very safe. But General Motors, you can call up, like General Motors and Ford and Chrysler and everybody, they all share on airbag design, on seatbelt design, on all of this stuff. And so you could imagine with the synthesizer industry, they could collaborate on accessibility. Like that could be a space for collaboration, not competition.
Yeah.
So it's not about I have accessibility better than you. It's we are all pushing each other forward and innovating in the space together. And I think that's like
it's like
really
when
cool
Sequential and Roland developed MIDI together.
Yeah, exactly.
It was
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this
exactly.
kind
It's
of,
just thinking of the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're thinking about it for interoperability. You're thinking about it as like a media equity move, going back to like the stuff ARP was trying to do, the stuff Serge was trying to do, get this in the hands of more people.
For sure.
Some of those people can't see, right? And so like, what can you do in that? And, universal design helps everybody. So Sean and I were talking in the elevator about this. Like the Serge UI UX is not like the best for a beginner anyway.
Even if you can see, yes.
Even if you can see. So having additional shapes that are reminding you of what kind of jack is which is kind of not the worst thing in the world anyway. And having like maybe a different shaped knob for an attenuverter versus an offset wouldn't be bad. Right.
Yeah.
Art based that into his design, right? Stevie Wonder told him use sliders, not knobs. They're accessible. And they have this rigorous design spec where if it's horizontal, it's an offset. If it's vertical, it's a scalar. So if you have a vertical slider on it, ARP equipment is multiplying a signal. If you have a horizontal, it is scaling a signal. That is consistent 100% across their entire product line for 10 years. Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Right. It is very cool. And I think standards, as much as I want to be like back in being like a punk rock musician, standards are not bad for those things, right? Like it's okay. And it would be, and one of the things that I like, the thing you celebrate about Eurorack is like, you know, there's like 200 active manufacturers now, at least. They all have their own different thing, but they all work in the same power rails and they all fit in the same boxes. Right. Maybe they want to blunder through some ideas around those standards for themselves. Like, you know, what if we all came together and said a hexagon jack is a CV out and a circular jack is a CV in and a square, you know, whatever, like something like that. And then you've got it.
Right.
Right. You've got like, you've made this like big leap forward in making it usable by people who can't read the little whatever, you know. I don't know. But like, you know, Moog had a Braille overlay for a while in the early aughts, right? For some of their equipment. Yeah.
I don't remember that, but
yeah, they only did it. I'll send it to you. They did a limited run of one synth.
For the Voyager, maybe?
I don't remember. I wrote it, you know, it's like, it's floating around somewhere.
I feel like Voyager was the big one in the mid-aughts, yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of the only one in the mid-aughts,
right?
Yeah.
Let me see what, or it might have been later, actually. Let me look. It was a sub-fatty, so it was much later.
Sub-fatty.
It's a sub-fatty. So they had a limited run of the sub-fatty with Braille overlays, right? So the spec we're designing is basically you can laser cut 32-inch plexi and put Braille on it with a UV printer. Public libraries around the country do this as a service for blind accessibility. It's also like a really lovely round trip to things like, you know, I don't know, like, you ever heard of this fella named Ray Kurzweil? Like Ray Kurzweil invented the speech synthesizer, basically. Right. He invented the PSOLA speech synthesizer as an accessibility tool for this talking book project. Right. And I think that is really interesting too. Like he is still, his successor company on that side of the house is still the industry standard. It's called Job Access with Speech, JAWS, Freedom Scientific. That voice is Ray Kurzweil's voice. Oh. So if you use a PC and you have a speech synthesizer and you don't like Microsoft system, because you might not like Microsoft system, you will use JAWS and it is Ray Kurzweil reading your email to you. Ray Kurzweil is like on a little bit of a different journey now. But
has been for a minute.
But in 1978, he was friends with Stevie Wonder too, and he was making him a sampler. And Stevie Wonder was like, "Hey man, can that thing talk?" Right? And they made a scan. They made an early OCR speech synthesizer. That's right. And I think that's cool. And I think like Alan Brightman, who is the head of Universal Access for Apple Computer in the 80s, out of their Boston research group. So he was like Steve Jobs' employee looking at access. Like he told me that there was like a lot of overlap between like the early like MIDI community and the people trying to do accessibility, because they understood that like the computer could make the synthesizer more accessible. We just like never kind of closed the loop on the tool chain to make it easy for everybody. And I think that's what we're going to try to do, is make it easy.
I think it's a really brilliant project. I guess like hopping off from where we're at, which is relying on social pressures to force the market to do what it should be doing. I think we can get to the kind of last broad battery of questions, which you know, the kind of overarching question we're addressing with this current incarnation of the podcast is how do you live as an artist under capitalism?
Oh my god!
And so this is a question that you know. you can respond pragmatically, you can respond bureaucratically, you can respond poetically, you can respond how do you make your life work?
I mean, I have the privilege of being a college professor, right? So I have a day job. And my day job is really awesome because I get to Robin Hood a tier 1 research university's engineering school in the cause of things like accessibility for people with disabilities, in the cause of furthering the cause of avant-garde experimental music. I have a summer residency program where people just make noise on the synths, right? I have, I try to do that. Mutual aid is super important in late stage capitalism, as is, I'm a big fan of like Anna Watkins Fisher, the play in the system. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like this is this idea that like people put in positions of power in capitalist bureaucratic entities have the ability to twist the system
right
to do good work, right, if they want to. So when I'm not totally depressed, I really do feel like I have some ability, I have some agency in that. I have one of the top design programs, graduate level design programs in the United States. We're the only program in the engineering school where the majority of students and faculty are women. We are like quadruple the national average in underrepresented minority students in engineering. We're like top 3 in the country in user experience research. It's sort of we're squeezed between MIT and Carnegie Mellon. So like our goal is to transform the tech industry by just putting people out there who are just different than the people who are usually in the room until they become the room, right? Until they become the people making the decisions. That's the best way to do it. I'm very, very tired of learning about AI from a bunch of guys who like dropped out of Stanford before they took the ethics class. Like I am just like my patience for that scene is wearing thin very quickly.
So ultimately you do have a good amount of faith in the capacity to transform institutions through, again, kind of
so like
either from within or through social pressure.
Yeah. And like and these mutual aid groups, like if you know, I don't know if you know about this thing in New York, there's this amazing thing called the School for Poetic Computation, SFPC.
You might have mentioned this to me before.
It's you should look it up. It's basically like an open source hacker design school. It was founded probably over 10 years ago by a bunch of disaffected faculty from the Parsons School of Design.
Okay.
Right? Who were like, why are we charging $60,000 a year for an MFA? This is unethical.
Yeah.
We can do an at-cost nonprofit spin on that, right? But they're in their like second or maybe even third generation of leadership and staff now. And it's just very cool to watch what they do. And New York City has a surfeit or a surplus or a bounty of these really amazing nonprofit art technology centers, things like HarvestWorks, things like IBM, right, that are like really important. There's like these art collectives like Hex House and Cute Lab that do stuff, and those are all really founded on this like they all have this kind of mutual aid thing built in. I'm more on the whole like like the play in the system. Like I have a budget that is obnoxiously large and I can deploy it to give my students really, really fancy toys that they can use to make really crazy stuff, right? And that's really fun. And then I can send them out in the world and they do good things. I think, and I'm really proud of this place, and I'm really proud of my colleagues who also are in the same thing. Like I'm the musician, right? We have, my faculty includes amazing activist artist who has a degree in water engineering. Her name's Tiga Brain. She will make you a coin-operated laundromat that provides water for a wetland reserve.
Amazing.
She will make you a online dating site based on smell. She will make you a whole bunch of stuff that's really thought-provoking about climate change. I have a woman on my faculty named Benedetta Piantella. He used to be the director of solar and sustainability for Arduino. Her and Tiga are working on a project called Solar Protocol that is reimagining the internet to do this thought-provoking question of what if next time you went to www.whatever.com, I could guarantee you that the computer serving that data is in the sun. right? So it reimagines the internet routing table to prioritize solar, and that recenters the global south in the conversation on servers. It makes us really think about the kind of like nature of like our world and like how data might flow. It's really interesting. I have all of these people who do accessibility, Amy Hurst and Regina Gilbert. There's all these cool people who work for me who I really like love going to hang out with every day. And I feel really lucky. It's really funny because I got my doctorate in 2003 and it took me forever to get an academic job. I kind of stopped trying. I was working at Cycling 74. And then we started negotiating the long range transition to becoming an Ableton subsidiary.
Right.
And I was kind of aware like eventually my job is going to vanish, because Ableton has a product management team in Berlin, and those people are like so much more capable, competent, skilled, and like on it than I am, that my job will inevitably vanish. Like there's no reason for me to exist. And I started like applying for academic jobs again. And in 2007, for fun, I applied for a postdoc at Princeton and I got it. And so I was the director of this thing called the Princeton Laptop Orchestra, the PLORC, for 1 year as a substitute teacher for Dan Truman on sabbatical. And that's how, and I got back into academia, and then I applied for this job, which was, what to do. NYU had just bought this school. It was an independent engineering school. People used to call it Brooklyn Polytechnic. And we merged with NYU in 2008, and they had this IDM program. They had a vocational design program. We had a class called Photoshop. And so I came out here and I was like, you can't have a class called Photoshop. And they were like, why not? And I was like, well, what do you do in the Photoshop class? They're like, you Photoshop stuff. And I was like, okay, guys. I was like, we have to call it photo editing. And they're like, what? And I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God, okay, we're starting over. Start over. Like, whatever. But like we had to kind of upgrade the program. And so I hired this brilliant woman from the University of Arts in Philadelphia named D'Angela Duff, who's my co-director, and she redid the curriculum. And now we're like this badass design school in an engineering college. And that's cool. And I think, I don't know, like doing good under capitalism is really hard. I think but I think like, one of the things that I do think the music technology industry needs, that mutable is like the exception that proves the rule. Like I think somebody needs to kick everyone's ass and get way, way more thought and intentionality around open source hardware. Like I think there is a potential revolution analogous to Arduino, which is an open source hardware platform for, physical computing and the arts, right? There could be something like that for synthesizers and music technology equipment in general. If you talk to if you ever interview Robert Henke, like at, Monolake, right? It is an Ableton guy. Like he will talk your ear off about this. He's like, I am shocked and dismayed that no company in Slovenia is cranking out a $5 kit by which you can make an oscillator or a filter or whatever. And there are millions and millions of music technology programs all around the country prototyping chips and circuits and whatever, the way Arduino has penetrated art schools.
Yeah.
Right. So like there's some validity to that thought, and some of it has to do with this kind of like baked in, the kind of like implicit capitalism around the music technology industry. If you look at like the DAW industry and match it up against the way game engines work now, you'll notice this really hilarious thing where all authoring software for game engines are now free, right? The Unreal Engine and Unity are free until you start making money using your platform. So like, it's just a thought-provoking
it's a way
idea.
to onboard people.
It's a thought-provoking idea of like, and DaVinci does it with their NLE Resolve, right? Resolve is free, right? And so like, why do you still have to pay money for Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, Cakewalk? Like, could you imagine a future where like those things are free too, until you start making money off records,
right?
So made with them. And that changes the sunken cost equation for independent musicians. There's like a bunch of stuff. I have a whole other soapbox about that whole thing. but I think there's like, I don't know. I think there's some stuff that could be really cool.
I mean,
to do there.
I love all of that.
I don't know.
You know, but you know, I guess like what immediately comes to mind here is, you know, last night I watched your TED talk.
Oh God,
You are.
that was why I quit. Really, like I did a TED talk and I did the Aspen Ideas Festival, and I thought those people were lovely. But I knew that I was a court jester. I felt like I was talking in front of the captains of industry.
Well, your concluding note, you know, you do this lovely talk, and you know, you probably are you are very likely the only guest we will ever have who has done a TED talk. So that's amazing.
I think that's safe to say.
And you do this lovely talk talking about your work, and you conclude with this very like visceral humanist message that like we shouldn't be using data in the service of reducing people to numbers.
Yes, that's right.
And you know, I could not help but feel like, oh man, Luke is up there telling a whole bunch of vampires, just don't suck blood, really.
No. Elon Musk was in the front row. Yeah, Elon Musk was in the front row.
This is very sweet. It's not gonna work.
Mark Zuckerberg was in the front row. Sergey Brin and Larry Page was in the front row. Bill Gates was there.
right.
Jeff Bezos was there. They were all there. And afterwards, I got to have lunch with Harrison Ford.
Well, that's pretty sweet.
Harrison Ford was
the
there.
person there.
Yeah. So here,
was he super stoned?
No. So he was totally. It was really amazing. So this is the good thing about TED is Chris Anderson, the guy who ran it, did not fall prey to the Walter Isaacson need to play American fair and balanced both sidism in the conference. So if you go to the Aspen Ideas Festival, the problem with the Aspen Ideas Festival is they platform Republicans. Right. So like, you know, you go to the Aspen Ideas Festival and there will be like, you know, Paul Ryan will just be up on stage lying.
Right. Talking about how great the free market is. Right.
So Chris Anderson, to his credit,
routine.
Like he only platforms people who can like rigorously demonstrate what they're doing with science, or they're artists, or they're whatever. And he does have, it is like kind of like, you know, neoliberal, globalist, whatever. Sure. It does have this like political vibe that you might disagree with, but he's definitely not platforming fascists. Right. He definitely is trying to like get everybody to be more humane.
I might casually suggest that not platforming fascists is a pretty
sure.
low bar,
but,
and we should probably, but
for like a conference where you have all these people, like it is, you can get some stuff done. And so every year they give out this $1 million prize. They give out this thing called the TED Prize. And the woman who got it that year was this woman, Sarah Parcak, who's an academic. She's a paleontologist who works for NASA Ames. So what she does is she uses satellite data to attempt to locate ruins or sites of cultural destruction or sites of piracy or whatever.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember the plot of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Watched it recently.
Because the plot. So the big thing about, you know, so like as everyone knows, Harrison Ford's character is completely immaterial to the plot of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Sure. The contemporary equivalent would be Leonardo DiCaprio in One Battle After Another. Nothing matters that he does, right? His daughter gets kidnapped and she saves herself, and he gets high as fuck and does a road trip movie, right? Like you know, like whatever, like. It's like he doesn't matter in that movie. I'm not saying it's a bad movie because of it, but it's the same thing with Raiders of the Lost Ark, right?
Harrison Ford is just watching the Nazis.
Harrison Ford
do a
is
bunch
the
of stuff.
MacGuffin, not the Ark, right? Like so, Harrison Ford is failing to prevent the Nazis from getting the Ark of the Covenant. They get it anyway. They win. They open it. They die. Right? So the actual protagonist of Raiders of the Lost Ark is the God of the Israelites, right? That is who actually saves the day at the end of it. So that's okay, right? So anyway, what they're looking for is they're looking for a lost city called Tanis, and this woman Sarah Parcak found it for real. Right? And so
it was only a matter of time before we became a conspiracy theory podcast.
So she found it. Right? She found it using NASA Landsat photography, right? She found it. And so she got the TED Prize because she made this online game, this video game where it's like a swipe left, swipe right for satellite photos, where like it's citizen science, where like millions of people around the world can vote on satellite photos to see whether there might be archaeological ruins there.
Huh.
So they give you like a little training, like look for straight lines, look for holes in the foliage, look for like weirdly geometric patterns, right? Like that kind of stuff and whatever. And so she got $1 million prize from TED to like further this research. And so they flew out Harrison Ford to give her the prize. And I have never witnessed an adult woman cry on stage in public in front of so many people as I saw her when he like, cause they play the John Williams tune and he gets up there and she like lost her shit. Cause it was amazing. It was magic. Like
That
it was
sounds
really
incredible.
magic. And that thing really sold me on like, it's not, like there is something actually really interesting going on there about that project, but he's the guy who took me to lunch after, and
Amazing.
we walked into a bar this is in Vancouver, and I'm like, it's like me and Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford's like attorney / buddy who was the other end, Sarah, and all the women at the bar ripped off their wedding rings as he walked by. I had never seen this before. Like all these women were like, you know, like whatever. That's what I was like, holy shit.
Oh, that's incredible.
And I was like, I am with the most attractive man on planet. I am having lunch with the final movie star, right? The last ever movie, you know, like whatever. And that was really cool. And he was really lovely. And we talked about disability, and we talked about data, and we talked about, you know, whatever. But that was like that was the coolest I got. And then I was like, fuck it. Cause then everything started to go wrong, right? We had all these police homicides. Right, we had Ferguson, we had Black Lives Matter, we had Trump. We had Brexit in the UK, we had Trump, and everything's just been really dark and really complicated and really awful. And the best thing you can do when you do that is you make a safe house.
Yeah,
and you invite all your friends in, and that's what I'm doing. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about your piece using the gun that fired shots with police scanners, and when I was at NYU, I was doing a lot of music information retrieval and transient detectors and things like that, and kind of there were projects to deploy these things to detect shots.
Sonic. Yeah. Sons of New York City.
However, now I think that idea of having a sort of distributed microphone network throughout the city that kind of tracks things is worrisome, given the presence of ICE and things like this.
So the way they ended up, so the way that grant ended up implementing their sensors, and this was smart, right? It's like Juan Bayo and Charlie Mydlars and all the people working on that realized that the most ethical way to do it was to prescribe it to DEP regulation of construction sites. So the sensors deployed now only exist codependently with jackhammers and backhoes is a way to monitor noise emissions on construction sites, because they were very aware that like a future mayoral administration could be like, let's put these on every phone pole and then we can listen, right? And so so they're basically in the chain of custody of DEP to be deployed as noise meters for construction, right? And I think that was like a pretty good. But I worked on that project. I did the K through 12 STEM project out of that. So we started doing a middle school program, and I think that's a cool way to kind of pivot it. But that's a good example of that, like play in the system thing. Like, so if the bad guys take over your country and you're the postmaster, you don't quit your job. You just start doing your job really badly.
Well, it's just, it always reminds me of like, during like the Obama administration, for example, with maybe the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki, but like a sort of line is crossed, and the belief is, well, it's okay if we all believe that the steward, the custodian of these systems that we're making is going to be doing it in the right way. And I think one thing that's happened in the past 10 years is that like that has completely disintegrated.
Right. Because you're right, Chris. There was like an article in like, I don't know, the goddamn Atlantic or New York Magazine about Obama, right? There was like the killer president.
Exactly.
Like we have somehow given this guy a green light to convert our military industrial complex to drones.
Yeah. And I think it's like,
Well,
this was
and it's similar to like the way in which, data is now, where I think, 10 years ago, you could have seen data. I think people were suspicious, but I think, generally people weren't quite as cynical about the use of data and their giving of data as they are now, because now, the face of who gets your data and who's using it is, Sam Altman, it's Palantir, it's Peter Thiel, and that line is now very, very clear to people. And so, in a way that previously giving your data up would have seemed somewhat innocuous, now seems quite terrifying,
and
because
they've
of
numbed
the
us to
custodians.
it, right? So they've numbed us to it with a 20-year run of anesthetizing us with the idea of like we are data, right? So
Of course, yeah.
And and that to me started with the Iraq War, like the 2003 Iraq War. Like that was like we were getting narrated the informatics of the war and not being told about any of the people. Right, like you would watch CNN and you would see like Aaron Brown on CNN, who was like a very like the last of the trustworthy journalists, right? Like the non-controversial, non-shock, trustworthy journalists, like Newsnight. He would be up there with like Wesley fucking Clark, who was basically doing military propaganda. Being like, and they have all these like charts and graphs that are like, well, the cost of oil is above blah, and then if we can get it below this, then this cost to this, and it's costing us $20 billion a day because of this weapon system, and blah 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 blah, and like the casualty stream becomes just another figure. Right. I wrote a string quartet about this. I have this string quartet called Hard Data that's like based on the casualty stream of the Iraq War. Where like there's a measure of music for every month of the war. So if 50 people got killed that month, they got to play 50 notes, right? And it's like that whole thing though. They anesthetized with it, then they started taking it. A person. You guys are in slightly the wrong topic area to do this podcast, but like a person who's really brilliant on this is Meredith Whittaker, who's the president of Signal, the Signal Foundation. The company that makes
app.
The app, right?
Oh, okay.
So the woman in charge of that is named Meredith Whittaker. She was a co-founder of an initiative called AI Now. She used to work at Google. She is really smart and can talk to you about the root kitting of your life through agentic AI. That basically like Anthropic, even if Anthropic is like temporarily pretending not to like sell stuff to the military weapons system of the United States, they're very much engaged in the idea of, hey, you want to take your wife to Paris for the weekend? Let me do all that for you. And now I have your credit cards and your calendar and access to your email and all of your preferences forever. And I am going to be your personal assistant. But then your personal assistant becomes this like body of subpoenable evidence against you.
I mean, this conversation is making me think how or rethink how the data sovereignty is probably one of the most important kind of grounds for political for a political movement right now.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of stuff around that. There's another kind of mutual aid is like the idea of federated data commons. So we have a grant right now with the University of Arts London doing a comparative study between the US and the UK around how artists understand their own civil rights and intellectual property rights vis-a-vis AI. Like one of the problems with like the cultural hegemony of the Anglosphere is we are lulled into the idea that the US and Canada and Ireland and Britain and fucking New Zealand and Australia, because like Australian actors get Academy Awards and American actors get BAFTA, it's the same thing, but it's not. The legal regime around AI and IP rights in America has no overlap with the United Kingdom, which has no overlap with Ireland because it's the EU, which has no overlap with Australia. So if you have a record label in the UK and somebody steals it and makes like an AI model off of it, you have no rights. Like the Labor Administration basically passed a bill that Meta wrote for them. Right. Whereas in the United States you can sue, and in Ireland they can't do it. right? And that's like a really important thing for everybody to start like keying in on, in the same way that somewhere murky in your back pocket, all of us have this factoid that you should incorporate in Delaware. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like everybody somehow knows that fact. Why do we know that fact? I'm not sure, but it's true, right?
Where all the credit cards are.
Yeah,
right?
it's something to do with credit cards. That. You know, like we all like have that fun factoid as Americans. Everybody should now be launching their record label in the Republic of Ireland. Yeah. No one should be making a record label in the United Kingdom. Huh. Right? That is a terrible idea.
I mean, it's like one of those things where, you know, when I started making music, you know, people would tell me like, you really got to get a handle on publishing and understand publishing. And I was like, dude, I don't like, this is legal. Man. I don't know what shit is.
Yeah, ASCAP, he's just, I think I'm on
it's like, I don't know what the fuck any of that is.
Yeah,
but it's, you know, like, kind of the same now with your data.
Totally,
like,
totally.
You know,
it's very similar. In America has a reasonably progressive IP regime around music publishing that, like, you know, Japan doesn't have. Like the reason why John Oswald's Plexure was buried in a landfill in America, but you can buy it in Japan, is Japan has like a fair use right baked into the law. You can sample up to 250 milliseconds of anything you want in Japan. Right. Whereas in America, it's a, you know, you can't use it as an affirmative case. You have to use it as a defense. You have to wait for somebody to sue you. So it's like a whole, you know, the whole thing is like a mess. So we're working on this project, and the thing we're trying to get out of it is a federated data commons, is a bunch of stuff online that's like resources and tools and data sets for not just musicians, but artists to really like get a handle on how AI might be used and how they might use AI to counteract their own AI, like Nightshade and stuff like that. Can you like pollute your own digital footprint to prevent it from being used in a training set, that kind of shit? I don't know. It's a mess.
Eventually you get to the dead internet where we have all the AI chatbots talking with each other, and we can log off and go do something. Go make a sandwich.
You could do that. We should just get our hands on a supercomputer, like, you know, factory, and have like some kind of thing where, like, you know, Claude and ChatGPT just start arguing with one another, and it'll be like the end of war games where the computers will all blow up. The only way to win is not to play the game.
You just get them involved in they just become mutual. They just become two neighbors on a cul-de-sac arguing with each other.
Right, and like passive aggressively, like trying to one up one another about where they're.
The only catch there, this is a very ecologically intensive.
I know.
Well, I guess
but I remember
they vaporize all the oceans while they're doing it. But hey,
I mean, you know, like, you know, a good movie, like two good. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark is always a great movie to watch, but two movies I often tell my students to watch, because none of them have ever watched before, is War Games and Strange Days.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Because War Games is this like thing about AI, right? And Strange Days is this thing about VR.
Yeah.
It's a cautionary tale about VR, right? And sort of thinking about in the alienation of, like, you know, whatever you think of it as telepresence sensoria, like the idea of like you're experiencing something through somebody else's eyes. And I think that I also tell people to watch Desperately Seeking Susan, because that's a kind of a little bit of a parable about social media. Right? Like Roseanne Arquette sees Madonna's ad in the back of the Village Voice, goes down there to watch it because she wants to participate. So that's kind of like liking on someone's Instagram post, and how that can kind of like whatever. Desperately Seeking Susan's an amazing movie.
It's been 20x years since.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
So
first
of all,
it is really good.
It's a reverse.
Since my mom had it on.
Oh, you know? Yeah. So Susan Seidelman directed it in 1985. It's a reverse Bechdel test movie. The men in that movie only talk about the women, and the women advance the plot. Right? Aidan Quinn is in it in maximum 80s hotness.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like really, you know, Madonna's in it.
Of course.
There's an amazing cast in it of like weird 80s actors. There's a scene filmed at Danceteria.
That's right.
It's really cool.
I guess it's also a good. So like I After Hours is a big favorite. It's an interesting companion piece to After Hours.
Yeah.
But just in terms of like, this is a pure 80s New York movie.
Yeah, it's a really good 80s New York movie. But I also tell them to watch Strange Days. Like, Strange Days is this kind of like, you know, like she also was like
It was Catherine Bigelow's the last good film,
It's-
basically.
yeah.
Last good one.
And it's amazing because it's like, it's like Ray Fiennes and Angela Bassett.
Yeah.
Two obnoxiously attractive people, right? Playing like, kind of like the petty bourgeois of the LA underworld at the turn of the century, right? Because she's like an armored car driver bodyguard, and he's
right.
like trading snuff films, and he's like a loser ex-cop, and he's a
Yeah.
junkie, right? And they're like, and it's this whole like amazing world. And my other favorite thing about that though is the soundtrack.
Good soundtrack.
But there's a funny thing about it. The non-diegetic soundtrack, the score, is Deep Forest.
Oh no shit.
And Deep Forest, this is a good to wrap it back to synthesizers for a minute. Do you guys all know about the thing with the product design of the Korg M1?
No.
Not offhand. Maybe.
So Korg ran out of time to get the M1 out for Christmas season, 1980, whatever. And the product manager at a certain point was like, fuck it. Everybody gets the same sound set. So it came with 4 megabytes, a Rompler, right? So it came with 4 megabytes of sound. So that was the first piece of consumer music gear available in America and Europe that had a sitar sample, and a djembe sample, and a doumbek sample.
And these were all in unethically sourced samples?
Yes. Yeah, but also that sampler, that piece of equipment is the cause of all of that late 80s, early 90s problematic cultural appropriation dance music.
Is that where the pan flute was from?
Including Deep Forest.
Right.
And so Deep Forest's title track for Strange Days, you're going to love this, is like one of these like hip techno songs, and it has a vocal. And the vocal, allegedly, is a duet between an Albanian folk singer
This I do know.
Peter Gabriel. The artist Peter Gabriel, okay? Where the first verse is in Albanian, but the second verse is in English, okay? So far, so good?
Mm-hmm.
But the lie is the Albanian part is gibberish. Because what these motherfuckers did, Deep Forest, these two French guys, is they took like kind of like a folkways, ethnomusicological, like historic recording of Albanian folk music, sampled a woman, cut her up, loaded her into their like Akai S whatever sampler, and just did something that was musically cool, but it's gibberish. But they didn't tell anybody it was gibberish. Then they transcribed it phonetically for Peter Gabriel, who then came in and sang the gibberish as a duet. They lied to him and told them that it was an Albanian folk song, and these are the lyrics. It's called Let the Earth Sleep. Peter Gabriel gave this interview where he was like, oh, I'm so excited to do this duet with this woman. They lied to him and said she was still alive, but was just like unavailable. It had to be an asynchronous session, right? Like, whatever. And he's an actual trained musician, so he can read music. So I'm sure he one-taked it. He just knocked it out of the park, right? Showed up at Abbey Road on a Tuesday, knocked it out of the park, like went to get a pedicure or whatever and forgot all about it, right? And then the record comes out, it's 1995, gets nominated both for a Grammy Best Soundtrack Album and an Oscar, Best Original Score, right? And there's a reporter who reviews the soundtrack album for Rolling Stone magazine. And because it's the United States, that guy is Albanian American. And he realizes it's gibberish because he speaks Albanian. And he outs Deep Forest, right? He accuses, he writes this expose that's like, these fuckers like just, did this riff on my culture. And Deep Forest do this like gaslighting non-apology where they're well, we are making it musically useful, whatever. But Peter Gabriel is very embarrassed because it's embarrassing, takes his fee and uses it to found a thing called WOMAD, which is the largest extant festival of what we think of as world music, of celebrating global musical culture. And that only exists because he got scammed by Deep Forest in 1995 for the Strange Days soundtrack directed by Catherine Bigelow, because those guys owned an M1 sampler. And this is why you guys have a podcast, man. Yeah. So that is my round the world. Yeah. And that is very important. That is a very important, very good nonprofit organization, right? So that's like very cool.
That's amazing.
So do cultural appropriation to save the world from cultural appropriation?
To get Peter Gabriel to save the world.
Somehow this all karmically solves itself.
Yeah, it does.
You know, and I'm sure, like, you know, Peter Gabriel at that point had all these really interesting friends, right? He was buddies with like Yusu Indoor and people like that who were probably like, you should donate the fee to something. And he was like, I have a better idea. Why don't we start a festival and, you know, like whatever. But that's all because of those fucking guys. Right.
The fucking M1.
Yeah. So we have an M1. I tell this story to my undergrads every time, and they're like, they're just like, because I feel like at that point I'm definitely doing like a Hunter S. Thompson thing in class. Like, you know, I'm just sitting there like raving at them, being like, listen, man, quit your job. Go down to Avenue C and 3rd Street. Call this guy Mike. He works at ABC No Rio. He'll get you a job. Just quit the system, man.
That I think is a perfect note to wrap on.
Yeah, that is my belief.
Awesome. Well, Luke, thank you so much. This was epic.
Chris, you live in New York?
He's in Barcelona.
I live in Barcelona.
Oh, you live in Barcelona.
Yeah,
I'm from New York, but I moved to Barcelona, so.
You live in Barcelona.
I live in Barcelona.
I love
Pretty
Barcelona.
Good. Everyone loves Barcelona. It's an amazing city.
You should come. We'll film we'll tape a sequel here.
I did video for somebody at the Sonar Festival once, and somebody high as fuck jumped the stage and tried to steal my laptop. But it was tethered by thumb screws because it was still VGA into the projection system. So they were like doing this dance with the security guards, like holding my clamshell Mac like Pismo G3 screw. And I was like, no. And the guy threw it and then jumped off the stage. And it landed and it didn't even shut down because Apple used to make hardware that was actually robust.
Those PowerBooks did their job.
That is my Barcelona story. That's all I got.
That's a good one.
But I love it. That's awesome. Do you come back to New York often?
I mean, I do. I was there recently. I mean, I have a kid, so it's a little tough.
How old's your kid?
18 months.
Oh, yeah. Although that age, if you do it right, it's kind of blissful.
We came when he was 9 months. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old, so my 6-year-old's like, if like the chi is wrong, she will not get on an airplane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's like, you know, like it's a conversation. When you're 18 months, you can just grab them. And be like,
we came when he was 9 months, and we stayed in New York for a month basically with him, and it was great because he couldn't walk, and we just had to like get him. I had to like baptize him in the East River, just to get the New York on him.
Yeah.
And
wow, you did that?
Yeah,
he didn't dissolve?
He didn't dissolve. I didn't tell a story, but I found this out from my dad. He was like, when I moved to Astoria, and the first thing my dad says to me was like, oh, my cousin died in the East River there. Because how there's that part of the East
New
River
York.
right at Astoria Park where they call it like there's the playground. It's kind of crazy. There's the playground there in Astoria Park, and it's called like Scylla and Charybdis Park, named after the two sea monsters.
In the Odyssey. Yeah.
And that's because basically everyone dies in the river there because the current. It's like where you have Randall's Island here, and you have the current get all fucked up, and so it's like this like zone of like fucked up currents, and it's like the most treacherous like place to swim in the city.
That totally tracks. Yeah, you
It's
guys should
pretty
have. You know, you
crazy.
should have on your podcast is you know Suzanne Thorpe.
I know the name.
Suzanne Thorpe's like an acoustic ecologist composer.
Okay.
She's
okay.
currently working on a project involving the East River and oysters.
That
Noise.
sounds amazing.
Oh shit.
They're
Cool.
trying to do like a commie pinko libtard Euro fucking like pollution remediation thing of the Newtown
Put
Creek,
oysters in the
where they
Gowanus
dump
Canal.
a bunch of mollusks
That's
in
great.
there,
Yeah.
right? So like, and so you know, when you do this in fucking like Belgium or whatever, you like dump a bunch of oysters in an industrial polluted waterway, wait 18 months, and then you have clean drinking water and a zillion oysters. In New York City, the oysters keep dying. And so what they've discovered is it's because Bill de Blasio, 2 mayors ago, instead of, you know, building any fucking public housing like he was supposed to do, resurrected all these 19th century ferry lines in the East River. And so there's noise pollution in the water, and the oysters are not opening, so they're not fucking.
Oh shit. Interesting.
Because the parking lot is right south. It's in Greenpoint, right? It's right south of the Newtown Creek.
The parking lot for the like where the boats
for
park
the
or
boats, the ferries.
Okay.
So they're idling and they're making so much noise that the oysters never open and never copulate.
Wow.
So they keep dying off. So Suzanne Thorpe is trying to fix this problem. She is like the Marvin Gaye of like oysters or whatever. She's trying to like figure out how to get the oysters to actually like whatever. And it's really interesting.
That's awesome.
And the
that's
and
super
her
cool.
cast of characters is highly idiosyncratic. Like somebody really needs to option this
Get her in touch with us.
Yeah. Like somebody needs to option a movie out of like the crazy people she talks to about this project. You know what I mean? Because it's like the head of DOT in charge of the ferry lines, the local environmental protection guy, somebody from the World Wildlife Foundation, some crazy sax player in Jersey who thinks he can use AI to like figure out what they're saying. Like everybody involved
The
in
John
this
Lilly
story.
of oysters.
Yeah, everybody involved in this story
I love it.
is like, okay, so that's Mark Ruffalo, right? And that one's like, you know, Parker Posey. Like you can kind of like mentally cast it when she describes it to you, and it could be like a really amazing movie.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Because and I haven't met any of them. She's like, we hang out, and she's like, so like last week I met this guy, and I'm like, whoa. Yeah, so that I think that stuff's really interesting. Yeah, she's trying to get the oysters to fuck,
That's awesome.
which is just hard to do. Yeah, so I don't know.